Chapter 122. Seeing the guard of Wei Xiao turn around and flee, Wu Qi did not have the time to figure out why he was here. From Meng Xiaobai's waist, Wu Qi pulled out a sharp knife that all the villagers of Meng village had a habit of carrying with them. With a shake of his hand, he threw the knife towards the man. Along with a sharp whistling sound, the sharp knife pierced through the air. The handle of the knife smashed forcefully onto the back of the man's head, causing his upper body to lean forward and fall to the ground while foaming at the mouth. "Hey, our young miss has personally come to challenge you. Who dares to run away? Who dares to run away? If Shi Tianma doesn't show up, all of you will die." Wu Qi glared at those apprentices in front of him and scolded them with a stern voice. Zhao Qinzue's eyes shone brightly. When he saw Wu Qi had purposely knocked out that man, he hastily brought a group of ferocious guards and dashed forward, dispersing the apprentices in front of them with sticks. After that, they tied up the guard and a few followers beside him and brought them next to Wu Qi. The few men who stood together with the guards struggled and roared, but Zhao Qinzue just let out a loud shout and gave them a round of beating. The few men were badly battered, and their faces were swollen and bruised. All they could do was cry out in pain, and none of them dared to utter any more curses. The secret agents of Scouting Office acted quickly. They rushed forward and tied the joints of these few men with ropes made from cow tendon, then gagged their mouths with strips of cloth that came with a strange smell, and dragged them to the back. A few instructors of the martial club dashed out, pointing their fingers at Wu Qi and shouted, "How presumptuous! This is the honorable guest of our club master. Why are you tying him up? Let them go, quickly let them go. Children, surround this group of people who don't know life from death." Following the scolding of these instructors, a large group of apprentices of the martial club pulled out their weapons, or picked up some stone chains, wooden sticks, and some other weapons. Slowly, they formed a circle, surrounding Wu Qi and his company in the middle of the square. On top of the wall of Shi Martial Club, more and more warriors came out to watch the show. These martial artists who were eager to see the world in chaos were either sitting on the wall or lying on the wall, laughing and pointing at the scene. Someone even blew a sharp whistle, pointed his finger at them and cursed at the top of his voice, "Cowards of Shi Martial Club. They are here to challenge our club. According to the rules of the Jianghu, we should fight them with real swords and spears. Are you trying to bully us with numbers?" Wu Qi laughed out loud. He cupped his fists and bowed to those warriors who were watching from the top of the wall. "Thank you for speaking up for justice. Today, our young miss has taken a fancy to the property of Shi Martial Club. Therefore, she has brought all of our brothers here to challenge the martial club and seize the place. I hope all of you can be our witness. If we can defeat Shi Tianma today, this Shi Martial Club will be ours." All the warriors on top of the wall burst into loud laughter, one after another, agreeing with Wu Qi's clamor. Someone had come to challenge Shi Martial Club, and this was a rare scene. Therefore, these warriors were eager to see the fight turn into a river of blood. Therefore, they kept cursing at Shi Tianma, cursing him as a cowardly old turtle who only knew how to bully those adventurers who did not have any power, and when a real tough guy came knocking on his door, he could only cower and tremble in fear. Amidst the chaos, 4 of the 8 ghost immortals who were disguised as servants had blended into the crowd, stealthily sneaking into the backyard of Shi Martial Club. Under the bright sunlight, all the escape techniques of ghost immortals who had cultivated themselves into Yin deity with the body of a ghost had lost their effectiveness under the bright sunlight. Therefore, they could only take advantage of the chaos and sneak into Shi Martial Club. With their current attire, they looked no different than any servant from an ordinary influential family. Therefore, they did not attract any attention from other people. Meanwhile, Wu Qi was still making a loud clamor, insisting on the so-called rules of the martial world, and asking the people of Shi Martial Club to come out and fight with him. However, those instructors on the scene were not the ones who could make the decision. They could only order all the apprentices to form a huge circle and surround Shi Martial Club, constantly compressing the space for them. None of them dared to answer Wu Qi's question, as they were not qualified to decide the future of Shi Martial Club. Whistles and clamor rose from all directions, and those warriors who came to watch the fun became even noisier. Since the experts of Sure Martial Club did not show up, the fact that nearly 3,000 apprentices had surrounded a few hundred warriors who came to challenge the martial club was a very big deal. If this matter were to be spread out, the reputation of Sure Martial Club would be tarnished to a great extent. These warriors kept yelling and cursing wantonly, even cursing 18 generations of Sure Tianma's ancestors. Right when the atmosphere was getting tenser and tenser, a long and sonorous cry that towered into the clouds was suddenly heard coming from a few courtyards of Sure Martial Club. A deep and powerful voice suddenly rang out amidst the long cry, "Which junior dares to be so presumptuous? Who dares to stir up trouble in Sure Martial Club? You bunch of useless fools, get the hell out of here now." The last word, "get the hell out of here," was like a muffled thunderclap. Nearly 1,000 warriors, who were either standing or lying on top of the wall, cried out in alarm at the same time. Blood sprayed out from their ears, as they lost their balance and tumbled down from the top of the wall, nearly dying from the fall. Accompanied by the loud cry, a group of over 20 men, each clad in a long black robe, with various weapons hanging on their waists, walked slowly out from the hall at the far end of the square, led by an old man. All the instructors on the scene immediately breathed out a sigh of relief. They smiled and said, "Young Martial Club Master is here, we can finally put our minds at ease." "Greetings, young Martial Club Master." Shi Wugo, the only son of Shi Tianma, was an expert of Unity God tier of Xiantian realm, and enjoyed a great reputation in the martial world of Ji City. After all, it was extremely difficult for a warrior without any background to cultivate into the realm of Xiantian realm, let alone breaking through the respiration tier of Xiantian realm and stepping into a higher realm. Unless the disciples of the 13 immortal sects of Great Yan dynasty possessed a perfect legacy of cultivation, and also possessed a spirit root that was more suitable for cultivation, it was nearly impossible for an ordinary warrior to cultivate into the higher realm of Xiantian realm. As a warrior, it was said that Shi Tianma had cultivated to the peak of embryonic breath realm of Xiantian realm, and Shi Wugo had also reached the realm of Unity God. In the martial world of Great Yan dynasty, both father and son could be considered as the supreme grandmasters. Therefore, when they saw Shi Wugo, all the instructors and apprentices of the martial club immediately spread out and lined up neatly on both sides of the square. They no longer looked as tense as before. Shi Wugo's stature was not tall, about 6 feet tall, clean and skinny. His white hair and beard were tied into a bun with a red string. It was said that he was more than 100 years old, but Shi Wugo's complexion was smooth like a young man's. He looked exactly like the so-called white hair with a ruddy complexion. He was clad in a black long robe with wide sleeves, and a long sword that was almost as tall as his body was hanging on his waist. He took one step at a time and came before Wu Qi in a steady manner. Disdainfully, he gazed at Wu Qi, who had used a mystic technique from Scroll of Stealing to conceal all his aura, and the ripples of his inner energy were only at the meridian cultivating tier of Xiantian realm. Shi Wugo shook his head. He gave Princess Xianglu a sidelong glance. Princess Xianglu had retracted the 5-colored divine rays within her body, and her aura was muddled and hard to detect. Shi Wugo could barely sense that Princess Xianglu had a cultivation base of meridian cultivating tier or higher, but that was all. He snorted coldly, then cried out in a deep voice, "So you are the ones who injured my disciples? Fine, I want all attendants and personal guards to cripple one of your own arms, and this little girl will have to kneel in front of Shi Martial Club for 3 days to atone for her crime. After that, she will give me a generous compensation for the medical expenses of my injured disciples. You young men have no idea of the immensity of heaven and earth. Luckily, you have come to Shi Martial Club and met a kind man like me. If it were any other martial club, you would have suffered a great calamity." Shi Wugo had put himself in a very high position, but Wu Qi and Princess Xianglu did not appreciate his kindness. Upon hearing his words, Princess Xianglu could not help but sneer and say, "You want me to kneel for 3 days to atone for my crime? In all my life, you are the first old man who dares to talk to me like this." An ominous gleam flickered in Princess Xianglu's eyes. She fiercely sized up Shi Wugo's skinny body, trying to figure out where she could strike first to give him a hard time. Meanwhile, Wu Qi was carefully sizing up Shi Wugo from top to bottom. A warrior of deity innate tier. This Shi Wugo had obviously attained the embryonic breath tier of Xiantian realm, and he was at the peak of it. Especially Shi Wugo's skin, which was glossy and smooth to the point that it looked a little strange, and there was an abnormal green hue underneath his skin. Obviously, he was cultivating with some strange cultivation technique that focused on tempering his corporeal body. How could he be a legendary warrior? A bright gleam of 4 different colors flashed in Wu Qi's eyes. He had seen through Shi Wugo's cultivation base. If not because there was a special cultivation technique in Scroll of Stealing that focused on cultivating one's eyes, perhaps he would have been fooled by Shi Wugo today. The cultivation technique he was cultivating with was extremely strange. Although the innate energy in his body was not very strong, all the energy was gathered in his fleshly body. By a rough estimation, the strength of Shi Wugo's fleshly body was at least 10 times stronger than the current Wu Qi. After injecting his innate energy into his eyes, Wu Qi could clearly see the dazzling light emitting from Shi Wugo's intrepid fleshly body. He couldn't help but shake his head. No wonder Lao Ai told Princess Ying Chuan that the person who assassinated Yen Buji was related to Shi Martial Club. Judging from Shi Wugo's current condition, how could he be a warrior? Behind him, there was at least an existence that was equal to the 13 immortal sects of Great Yen Dynasty. Fortunately, Lao Ai had been operating in Ji City for so many years, and even the Prince of Ren, Yen Xianchen, had become his disciple. If not, who would have thought that a martial club in mighty Martial Street would have the courage to assassinate a duke of the dynasty? Sighing lightly, Wu Qi fished out a total of 300 explosive talismans, which were produced by Heavenly Spirit Sect, from his storage ring. He threw the talismans, which were tightly bundled with a red string, towards Shi Wugo. With a quick reaction, Shi Wugo grabbed the thick stack of paper with one hand. What is this? Why are you giving this to me? Shi Wugo looked at the explosive talismans, which were tightly bundled with a red string, and could no longer be identified. Then, he turned to look at Wu Qi with great astonishment. He hefted the bundle of explosive talismans in his hand. It looked as light as a feather, and there was no scent or poison on it. It didn't look like a hidden weapon used to assassinate someone. Without hesitation, Wu Qi grabbed Princess Zhongli's little hand, spun and sprinted away. After running several hundred feet away, with a thought in his mind, the thick stack of explosive talismans in Shi Wugo's hand exploded abruptly. The raging flame swept across an area of 1,000 feet in circumference. Shi Wugo was shrouded in dark smoke from the explosion and was sent flying backward. Blood that was pale green in color and sticky like ink kept spraying out from his broken body. The group of over 20 Xiantian warriors who followed behind him didn't even have the time to let out a miserable howl before they were ripped into pieces by the explosion. Those apprentices of the martial club who lined up neatly in the square were howling miserably. Although they were quite a distance away from the center of the explosion, the power of 300 explosive talismans exploding at the same time was extremely domineering, almost comparable to the power of an upper-grade, 9 Heavens Thunder talisman, which was drawn by a human immortal of Jin Dan realm from Heavenly Spirit Sect with all his energy. Nearly 1,000 apprentices of the martial club were thrown into the air by the shockwave, and were thrown several hundred feet away. It was a complete mess, and blood was everywhere. A long howl that sounded like the howl of a wild beast was heard coming from the backyard of the martial club. A stiff, cold, and emotionless voice was heard coming from afar. Who dares to hurt my son, my disciple? Hand over your life. A strong gust of wind tore apart the flame produced by the explosion of the explosive talismans, as a tall and burly figure appeared before Wu Qi, carrying the severely wounded Shi Wugo. Chapter 123. Shi Tianma, the owner of Shi Martial Club. Different from his short and scrawny son, Shi Tianma stood nearly 10 feet tall and burly, so muscular that he looked like the human form of Xiong Qing and his brothers. His hair was so dark that it shone brightly, as if it was a black hole that absorbed all the light. His skin was strangely pale, so pale that it looked lifeless and lifeless. However, Just like his son, underneath his skin, there was a very light green hue. Bringing along a strong wind, he dashed towards them from the backyard. After shattering the flame and airwaves produced by the explosion of 300 explosive talismans with a single punch, Shi Tianma's aura rose to a higher level. An invisible strong wind was coiling around his body, pressing towards Wu Qi and Princess Xianglu without ceasing. When he dashed towards them just now, he lightly tapped the ground with the tip of his foot, shattering all the 2 feet thick stone bricks on the ground into powder. Wu Qi could see and hear everything clearly. When Shi Tianma was dashing, he did not use any innate energy, but purely relied on the strength of his fleshly body. Yet, his speed was almost the same as the speed of an ordinary Jin Dan flying sword. On top of that, when he was rising and falling, his footsteps sounded like muffled thunders, extremely heavy. His body weight was also much heavier than an ordinary person. Judging from the sound of his footsteps, the density of his body was at least 30 times that of an ordinary person, and the density of his body could be compared to an iron that had been tempered 100 times. How powerful was the power contained in a body like this? Wu Qi had no doubt that this guy could even use his fleshly body to fight against the spells and flying swords of a Jin Dan human immortal. However, he did not have the strange signs that a Jin Dan human immortal should have. His cultivation base should be at the embryonic breath tier of Xiantian realm, but the strength of his innate energy was at least 100 times stronger than his son, Shi Wugo. The innate energy in his body was nearly compressed into a mercury-like substance. What an evildoer! What an evildoer cultivation technique! Gingerly, Wu Qi looked at Shi Tianma. His right hand was tightly gripping Princess Zhang Li's little hand, shielding her behind his back. A strange four-colored gleam was flashing in the depth of his eyes, as he was carefully observing every movement of Shi Tianma, fearing that Shi Tianma would suddenly lay his hands on Princess Xianglu. 4 ghost immortals walked up slowly and stood beside Princess Xianglu, guarding her. 4 pairs of deadly still and gloomy eyes were fixed on Shi Tianma. Shi Tianma, who had a handsome face and looked to be in his 30s, was carrying his son, whose body was badly damaged by the explosion and was dripping with blood. He roared furiously, "What kind of grudge does Wugo have with you? Junior, how many explosive flame talismans did you use to injure him to this extent? You. Forgetting to talk with Wu Qi, Shi Tianma let out a few furious roars, then hastily sprayed out streams of green mist from both palms, slapping forcefully onto Shi Wugo's body. Then, he took out a few dark green pills, which emanated a strong scent of grass and wood, and made Wu Qi feel dizzy after smelling them. Then, he stuffed them into Shi Wugo's mouth. Very soon, the wounds on the surface of Shi Wugo's body began to heal. The healing speed was so fast that no one could believe that he was still a normal human being. Wu Qi glanced at the few dark green pills, and from their smell, he could tell that they were a few extremely poisonous herbs. These herbs were mentioned in Scroll of Stealing as well. Not only were they extremely poisonous, they also contained a strange force that could temper the fleshly body and stimulate the potential of one's body. However, these herbs were not meant to be consumed by humans, but were used by some evil cultivators to refine various demon beasts as pets, so they could be used to guard their sect. Yet, Shi Tianma had actually fed his own son with this strange pill, which was called Beast Body Pill. Was it because both father and son were demon beasts that had transformed into human form, or had they been refined by someone using an evil cultivation technique? In Wu Qi's mind, the latter possibility was more likely. After all, for demon beasts to transform into human form, they had to form their demon cores like Xiongqing brothers. Without cultivating into a demon immortal, they could only maintain their beast form. Looking at Shi Wugo's wounds that were healing at an incredible speed, Wu Qi said coolly, "This is the best kind of explosive talisman that Heavenly Spirit sect sells to the public. 300 of them were detonated at the same time. This kind of explosive talisman costs 60 gold coins in the market. In order to injure Shi Wugo, I've spent quite a lot of money." Princess Xianglu did not have the concept of money. She poked half of her face out from behind Wu Qi's shoulder, smiled and said, "That's right, 60 gold coins for one explosive talisman, and 300 of them would cost 18,000 gold coins. Even 18,000 gold coins could not kill a man. It seems that the explosive talisman of Heavenly Spirit's sect has been diluted." Yen Bugue, who was standing aside with the secret agents of scouting office, nearly fell to the ground. He looked at Wu Qi with a bitter expression, shaking his head. That was 300 explosive talismans, and he just threw them all at once. Although they were the lowest grade talismans of Heavenly Spirit sect, they still cost 18,000 gold coins. Yen Bugue kept murmuring to himself, as he had no idea where Wu Qi got so much money. He knew that Wu Qi bought 200 explosive talismans from him for the first time. But, when did Wu Qi get his hands on 300 explosive talismans? Both Princess Xianglu and Yen Bugue had different reactions to Wu Qi's extravagant spending. Shi Tianma was so angry that his body was trembling. He cried out with a stern voice, 300 explosive talismans. What grudge do you have with my son? Is it worth it for you to use such a method to injure him? Who exactly are you people? Are you here to challenge the Shi Martial Club? Shi Tianma had also come to his senses. Both Wu Qi and Princess Xianglu did not look old, and it was not the result of taking some medicinal pills or using some evil cultivation technique to maintain their youthful appearance. Instead, they were truly young boys and girls. None of them was older than 18 years old. Yet, both of them had the cultivation base of Xiantian realm. Needless to say, they had a very solid background. Detonating 300 explosive talismans at once just for the sake of beating someone up was not something an ordinary person could do. Putting aside the fact that 300 explosive talismans were worth over 10,000 taels of silver, who in their right mind would actually bundle up the talismans and detonate them? One explosive talisman could severely injure a warrior who had cultivated his internal energy, and 10 explosive talismans could severely injure a Taoist of respiration tier of Xiantian realm. When 100 explosive talismans exploded at the same time, it could even threaten the life of a human immortal like Jean Dan. Would an ordinary person take the risk of being killed by the explosion and detonate 300 explosive talismans at once? It was not only a rich and overbearing act, but also a hint of insanity. Judging from the way Wu Qi acted, he did not look like he came from an ordinary warrior family. Even those wealthy and powerful merchant families who had been living for generations would never be able to cultivate someone like him. Judging from the way he acted, he did look like a warrior with blood and iron in his veins, and he was definitely an elite who had crawled out from mountains of corpses and seas of blood. And here was the problem, as Wu Qi looked to be younger than 18 years old, how could he possess the temperament and experience of a warrior with blood and iron in his veins? The raging Shi Tianma forced himself to calm his mind. Deep in his eye sockets, a pair of eyes gleaming with a strange green gleam was fixed straight at Wu Qi. Shi Wugo struggled hard in Shi Tianma's palm, groaning and yelling, asking Shi Tianma to avenge him. If not for the profound cultivation technique practiced by him and his son, which made their fleshly body much stronger than ordinary warriors and cultivators, he would have been blown into pieces by the sudden attack launched by Wu Qi just now. Although he reacted quickly and exercised a defensive mystic technique to prevent his fleshly body from being blown into pieces, his internal organs were still severely injured. "Dad, kill them. Capture that little girl, I want to teach her a good lesson." Shi Wugo screamed with a hoarse voice, glaring at Wu Qi and Princess Xianglu with a ferocious gleam in his eyes. Shi Tianma stretched out his hand and pressed on Shi Wugo's mouth. He stared at Wu Qi and Princess Xianglu and snapped sternly, "Who are you? Why are you stirring up trouble in my Shi Martial Club? Although I'm a little overbearing when I'm in Ji City, I've never offended any noble. With your cultivation base, and..." Shi Tianma gave Meng Xiaobai and the others a glance, sneered and said, "Neither of you have guards that ordinary people can have. If I may ask, which one of you have offended?" Wu Qi did not say a word, but a strange gleam was seen flowing in the depth of his eyes, as he kept staring at Shi Tianma. How much blood essence did it take to temper such a strong fleshly body? No matter what kind of evil cultivation technique Shi Tianma had cultivated to achieve what he had today, there was no doubt about the strength of his fleshly body. For others, Shi Tianma's fleshly body was useless. If it were to fall into the hands of some evil cultivators, it would be a good material for them to cultivate all kinds of battle tools and puppets. But for Wu Qi, Shi Tianma's fleshly body was simply a great tonic. With such a strong and powerful fleshly body, how much spirit, energy, and spirit could he have? If he could capture Shi Tianma alive, Wu Qi would be able to borrow the energy essence in his body, allowing him to quickly break through the stages of meridian cultivating and body strengthening by using the source of Earth Chapter, Wood Chapter, and Fire Chapter. Currently, Wu Qi's fleshly body had the word soft. If he could complete the body strengthening of earth, wood, and fire, his fleshly body would be able to possess the heaviness and firmness of earth, the flexibility and longevity of wood, and the vigorous vitality of fire. He is indeed a good thing. We can't let him go. Wu Qi was gazing at Shi Tianma with a strange gaze. It made Shi Tianma's heart turn cold. If Wu Qi was not a lunatic, it would mean that Wu Qi was looking down at him with a condescending look. If Wu Qi was not a lunatic, then he definitely had something to rely on. Shi Tianma fixed his gaze on Wu Qi, suppressed the uneasiness in his heart and cried out, "Who are you? Why are you causing trouble in my Shi Martial Club? If I have offended you in any way, I'm willing to apologize to you." The surrounding disciples burst into an uproar. When had they ever seen Shi Tianma admitting defeat in such a humble manner? He was the strongest grandmaster of martial arts in Ji City, so why would he lower his head and admit defeat to two young men and women who came to cause trouble? Wu Qi still didn't say a word. With a strange smile on his face, he kept staring at Shi Tianma from head to toe. But, it was Princess Xianglu who couldn't bear it anymore. She leaped out from the crowd, laughed and said, "Why am I causing trouble in your place?" "Ugh, I'm not, I've taken a fancy to this courtyard of yours. Sell it to me for 3 taels of gold, and you can go wherever you want." Just now, when Wu Qi said he would buy Shi Martial Club for 3 taels of gold, Princess Xianglu could still remember it until now. Shi Tianma paid no attention to Princess Xianglu, who obviously only knew how to stir up trouble. He stared at Wu Qi and asked in a cruel tone, "Why are you not talking? Are you waiting for something?" Before his voice could fade away, the ground of Shi Martial Club suddenly trembled a few times. A muffled explosion came from the backyard. Vaguely, one could see a large number of bricks, tiles, and stones flying high up into the sky. At least 7 to 8 buildings were blown up into the sky. A couple dozens of human figures were ripped into shreds amidst the airwaves and broken bricks. Looking from afar, a great number of broken limbs were falling down from the sky like raindrops. Shi Tianma's expression changed abruptly. He cried out with a stern voice, "Who broke through the formation of my secret chamber?" From the direction of the backyard, ghost howls soared into the sky. For grayish-white, translucent human figures were seen shooting up into the sky. Countless broken objects were brought up by the chilly wind, flying messily together with these 4 human figures, flying straight towards Wu Qi. Accompanied by an ear-splitting ghost howl, a white human figure carrying a few objects flew straight towards Wu Qi. "Mr. Wu Qi, here is the identity token of Duke Yen Lu, and it is sealed with a few layers of restrictive spells." "The identity token of Duke Yen Lu?" Wu Qi sneered. Shi Tianma's face fell instantly. He hugged his son and sprung up into the sky like a cannonball. Chapter 124. Without any ripple of magical energy, Shi Tianma sprung up into the sky, relying solely on the muscle strength of his legs, and leaped up into the sky like a flea. An ordinary man could jump 3 feet high, a warrior of the Hotian realm could jump 30 feet high, and a Daoist of Xiantian realm could jump 1,000 feet high by riding on the wind. Shi Tianma leaped up into the sky purely with his muscle strength. What Wu Qi heard was a thunderclap, and a dark shadow flashed before his eyes. In the next moment, Shi Tianma had already leaped over 5 miles high. In just a snap of a finger, Shi Tianma had leaped up 5 miles high. He let out a long and sonorous cry and thrust his right arm forcefully towards the sky. A white air barrier shot out to a distance of 3 to 5 miles. Borrowing the counterforce from the explosion of the air barrier, his body turned into a dark shadow and fled towards a far distance. Every movement of his consumed only the strength of his fleshly body, as he did not use any of the innate energy in his body. 6 gusts of chilly wind towered up into the sky. Just as Shi Tianma's body had traveled less than 1,000 feet, the 6 grayish-white chilly winds had already coiled around him. Suddenly, ghost cries rang out in the sky, as the sky was filled with green phosphorescence and chilly thunderbolts the size of a human head. The densely packed thunderbolts kept exploding and shattering the clouds in the sky. Countless drifting clouds spread out in all directions, leaving behind long trails of cloud in the sky. Shi Tianma roared furiously, thrusting his right arm out again and again, forcing those ghost immortals to keep retreating. It was near noon, and the scorching sun was shining high up in the sky. The overall strength of these ghost immortals had been weakened to the extreme. The combined strength of 6 ghost immortals was merely equal to the strength of 2 ghost immortals. The strength of Shi Tianma's fleshly body was mighty and tough. Although it was a secret evil technique, the attribute of his strength was of pure yang, which was a perfect counter to these ghost immortals. The chilly thunderbolts unleashed by 6 ghost immortals bombarded Shi Tianma, yet they could barely entangle him, and had no way to fight him face to face. Wherever Shi Tianma's fists passed, the chilly wind would be torn apart, and the thunderbolts would shatter. Occasionally, when his fists landed on the bodies of these ghost immortals, the ghost immortals who had transformed into their original forms would let out strange cries, transform into countless chilly winds, and flee several thousand feet away. When they regained their original forms, they would unleash the chilly thunderbolts and pounce towards Shi Tianma once again. These ghost immortals had made up their mind. Even under the scorching sun, they did not hesitate to consume their energy and unleashed wave after wave of chilly thunderbolts, entangling Shi Tianma and preventing him from escaping. Shi Tianma, who had an extremely strong fleshly body, but was not an expert in divine abilities or magic, slowly descended from the sky. He knew some methods to control the wind, but these little tricks of the Xiantian realm couldn't let him fly around in the sky like these ghost immortals. While holding his son, who was coughing out blood due to the violent impact, he fell down from the sky. After that, a dozen or so thunders exploded behind him, sending him flying back to Shi Martial Club and landing heavily on the square of Shi Martial Club. 9 Origin Sealing, Imperial Decree. In the void, 6 ghost immortals let out shrill cries. 9 grayish-white beams shot out from the top of each of their heads, looking as thin as a spider web. Together with an evil wind that blotted out the sky and blotted out the earth, they came pressing down from the sky and enveloped the entire Shi Martial Club. 54 wisps of white mist weaved into a large net, which kept absorbing the yin energy gushing out from underground. Gradually, it transformed into a grayish-white light shield that hovered above Shi Martial Club. A couple dozens of green runes, each several tens of feet in circumference, were faintly visible within the light shield. A bizarre aura that made one feel cold and powerless was rising slowly from underground, drilling into one's body through the soles of one's feet. Apart from the men brought here by Wu Qi, all the instructors and apprentices of Shi Martial Club were shivering from head to toe and fell to the ground. The blood and qi on their faces faded away quickly, and soon, their faces turned as pale as a dead man's. No matter it was the ordinary apprentices, the instructors of peak stage Hotian realm, or the instructors of Xiantian realm, none of them could survive under the light shield. Shi Tianma let out a furious roar. He hugged Shi Wugo tightly, swung his arm and thrust out his fist. In this punch, Shi Tianma had exerted all of his abilities. The innate energy in his body burst out along with ear-splitting noises. Abruptly, a clump of dark green light burst out from his right fist, transforming into a gigantic fist that measured several tens of feet in circumference, thrusting towards the grayish-white light shield. A muffled boom rang out, as the green fist collided forcefully with the light shield. The fist exploded, and a small hole of a few feet in diameter was torn open on the light shield. Stomping his feet, Shi Tianma was about to bring his son and rush out through the small hole. However, Wu Qi had moved as well. He pointed his finger out, and a wolf howl soared into the sky. 7 dark wolf heads, each the size of a human head, leaped towards Shi Tianma while emanating an eerie cold air. There were 49 wolf heads on the sword of greedy wolf, and according to the number of great divination, it had endless magical functions. However, as Wu Qi dared not to expose his cultivation base of Jin Dan realm, he could only control the sword of greedy wolf with the cultivation base of meridian cultivating tier of Xiantian realm, and could only produce the most basic 7 wolf heads. The sword beam moved at an incredible speed, as the 7 dark wolf heads, each dragging a 10 feet long dark tail behind them, bit fiercely on Shi Tianma's body. The wolf fangs bit down viciously, producing a large amount of sparks on Shi Tianma's body, and producing a loud noise that sounded like metal clashing. Upon hearing the noise, Wu Qi could not help but feel his teeth turning numb. How strong was his body, that it could cause the wolf heads transformed from the sword of greedy wolf to produce such a noise. However, a corporeal body was, after all, a corporeal body, and the sword of greedy wolf was a flying sword of lower tier magical treasure level. The 7 wolf heads bit fiercely on Shi Tianma's body, and the razor-sharp wolf fangs sank deep into his body while leaving a large amount of sparks behind. The moon-swallowing greedy wolf grand formation of 9 serenities soul-devouring formation was activated. Several dozens of dark streams shot out from the wolf mouths, squeezing into Shi Tianma's body while producing jarring and strange howls, crazily extracting and devouring his enormous blood and energy essence. Sizzling noises lingered without an end, as Shi Tianma's body, which had just sprung up from the ground, fell heavily to the ground once again. The 7 wolf heads attached to his body looked like 7 huge holes on a high-pressure airbag. As a result, the energy in Shi Tianma's body was completely depleted, and how could he still jump up? The dark airflow kept bringing out streams of dark green liquid, each as thick as a bowl, from Shi Tianma's body. The 7 wolf heads were howling joyfully, greedily digesting the dark green blood and energy essence, turning them into the power of the sword of greedy wolf. Shi Tianma let out a wild howl of pain. He stamped his foot fiercely, causing a large sheet of dark green flame to burst out from his body, pushing the 7 wolf heads away from his body. However, these 7 wolf heads were transformed from flying swords. Although they were pushed away by the flame, the razor-sharp wolf fangs still dragged and scratched on Shi Tianma's body, immediately ripping off a few pieces of blood and flesh the size of a bowl. With a flash of dark light, these pieces of blood and flesh were ripped to shreds, and the enormous energy essence contained in them was completely absorbed by the sword of greedy wolf, turning into a pile of ash that slowly fell to the ground. Then, 6 dark green thunderbolts, the size of a water tank, descended from the sky and hit on the top of Shi Tianma's head, who was howling in extreme pain. The thunderbolts refined by ghost immortals had a very low explosive noise, and the explosive force was not too strong. However, the vicious phosphorescent thunderbolts were specialized in damaging the nascent divinity and blood essence of the cultivators. Struck by the thunderbolts, Shi Tianma's body trembled immediately, and blood burst out from his 7 apertures. His innate energy was extremely strong, and his fleshly body was incredibly strong. However, as he cultivated with a very strange technique, the strength of his soul was only slightly weaker than a warrior of peak Hotian realm. Struck by the thunderbolts unleashed by a ghost immortal who had formed his ghost core, Shi Tianma threw his head back and let out a miserable howl. Large amounts of green blood burst out from his 7 apertures, and he fell to the ground immediately. Shi Wugo let out a shrill cry. He sprung up to his feet, grabbed Shi Tianma and carried him on his back, clenched his jaws tightly, and randomly picked a direction and sped away. He was still trying to find a way out of death, but suddenly, he heard a loud clang. Princess Zhangli had pulled out an iron stick from nowhere, dashed to his back and gave him a heavy smack. Shi Wugo rolled his eyes and fainted on the spot. Wu Qi turned his head over, and all the secret agents of scouting office and palace guards on the scene had turned their bodies as well. No one dared to look at the scene where the most honorable princess of Great Yan dynasty gave someone a heavy smack from the back. Only Bai Zhuer and Bai Zuer were clapping and cheering with a silly and naive look. "Princess, what a clean smack." "Hee hee, Although this Shi Wugo is very strong, he was still knocked down by Princess with just a single strike. Princess Xianglu tilted her chin up. She was about to boast about herself with a complacent look on her face when she suddenly saw the strange expression on Wu Qi and the others' faces. Hastily, she threw the iron stick far away, put on a gentle, graceful, and shy posture that made her look like a water lotus flower, and carefully walked behind Wu Qi. With a shy smile on her face, she lowered her head and stood still. A miserable howl was heard coming from a far distance. An unlucky disciple of Shi Martial Club was hit on the head by the iron stick thrown by Princess Xianglu. His head was badly bruised and bleeding, and half of his teeth were knocked out. It was unknown whether it was because of fear or the severe pain, but this disciple of Shi Martial Club suddenly burst into loud sobs. Princess Zhongli's expression changed slightly. She stared at the disciple with a flustered and exasperated look, stamping her feet fiercely and shattering the floor tiles within a circumference of several tens of feet into powder. Wu Qi cleared his throat and ignored the little action of Princess Xianglu. He took over the identity token handed over by the ghost immortal, and began to carefully examine it. The color of the token was dark green, the favorite color of the nobles of Great Yan Dynasty. The token was engraved with patterns of wind and clouds, and underneath it was a vast ocean. Between the ocean and the sky, a few swallows could be seen flying. On the back of the token, a few characters were engraved with gold: Buji, Duke of Yanlu. Everyone, look carefully. The evidence is conclusive. This Shi Martial Club is closely related to the death of the previous Duke of Yanlu, Buji. Men, break Shi Tianma's shoulder blades, pierce through all 36 special acupoints in his body, and detain him. All the disciples and instructors of Shi Martial Club will have their cultivation base crippled, and be sent to the prison of West Wind Guard of Scouting Office. Each of the 5 Wind Guards of Great Yan Dynasty had their own prison in Ji City. Among them, the prison of Central Wind Guard was the largest, and the security was the strictest. But, how could Wu Qi dare to throw these criminals into Qin Qingshui's territory? He could guarantee that once these people were sent to Central Wind Guard's prison, in less than 3 days, they would either be killed, or all the credit would be given to Qin Qingshui. So, why would he send benefits to his enemy? Currently, in Ji City, only the West Wind Guard that Lu Qingfeng and Wu Qi could rely on was the West Wind Guard under the rule of Yan Zhihui. A large group of secret agents from West Wind Guard of Scouting Office had rushed over after hearing the news. Skillfully, they crippled the cultivation base of all the instructors and disciples of Shi Martial Club, then tied them up with specially made ropes and threw them into prison wagons that came rushing to the scene. With a total of 1,000 prisoners, they were sent to the prison of West Wind Guard. Wu Qi ordered the ghost immortal who sneaked into Shi Martial Club, broke into the secret chamber and found the token, to lead the way. Along the way, in a serious tone, Wu Qi told Princess Xianglu and his entourage, "Everyone, listen carefully. I've taken a fancy to the foundation of Shi Martial Club, and with the help of Princess Zhongli's power, I want to annex Shi Martial Club and open my own martial club in Ji City. By accident, I found out that Shi Tianma was related to Yan Buji's death. Everyone, you have to find out the cause and effect of this." Princess Zhonglu stared at Wu Qi with a puzzled expression. She had no idea why he was making such a solemn confession. However, she didn't get to the bottom of it and interrogate him in detail. Instead, she just displayed the dignified bearing of a princess and fiercely threatened all the people behind her. She swore in front of all these people that if anyone dared to not follow Wu Qi's order and dared to talk nonsense, she would definitely make all 9 generations of that person regret that they were born. With Princess Zhongli's tyrannical behavior, Wu Qi thought that perhaps this confession could be concealed from Lao Ai and Yan Xianchen for some time. But, it was hard to say. Lao Ai, that peerless evil man, had been operating in Ji City for so many years. Who knew if he would discover something behind this? While he was pondering, they arrived at Shi Tianma's secret chamber. Chapter 125. Muffled footsteps were heard faintly coming from a far distance. It was the city guards of Ji City who were marching towards them. The battle between Shi Tianma and the 6 ghost immortals in the sky had long alerted all the relevant government offices in Ji City. Hundreds of sky-patrolling eagle guards soared into the sky from all the scouting offices, bringing with them a dazzling blue gleam as they wheeled in the sky, sealing off the surrounding areas of mighty Marshall Street. Wu Qi hastened his pace and came to the front door of the secret chamber, which was broken through by the 4 ghost immortals with brute force. This secret chamber of Shi Tianma was indeed well hidden. The entrance was located under a rockery in the backyard, in a deep well that went straight up into the sky. The depth of the well was over 1,000 feet, and the circumference of the well was less than 3 feet. Anyone with insufficient cultivation base would definitely be turned into a meat patty if they fell into it. The wall of the well was smooth, without any place that could be used as leverage. On top of that, there were several hundreds of bizarre runes engraved on it, emitting dazzling dark green, dark blue, and various other colors. According to the ghost immortals who broke through the restrictive spell, these runes contained a deadly poison, and any ordinary living beings would turn into pus and blood upon touching it. Fortunately, Wu Qi had let the 4 ghost immortals sneak into this place, as all the deadly poisons under the heaven had no effect on these ghost immortals, who had no corporeal bodies. The deep underground shaft was filled with a gloomy aura, which allowed the 4 ghost immortals to avoid the sunlight, allowing them to unleash a stronger overall strength. With a round of violent bombardment from the phosphorescent flame and thunder, they easily broke through all the restrictive spells on the shaft and entered the deep well. It was because these ghost immortals were experts in passing through walls with their shapeless bodies, regardless of whether it was flowers, grass, soil, trees, rockery, or stone walls, they could just pass through everything. That was the reason why they could find this secret chamber in such a short period of time. If it were someone else, even the most seasoned investigator, it would not be so easy for them to find the entrance to the secret chamber in this rockery, which covered an area of over 1,000 feet in circumference. Before Wu Qi could enter the deep well, Princess Xianglu was the first to impatiently jump into the well, taking the lead and rushing into the secret chamber. Very soon, a buzzing echo came from underground. So many beautiful things, they are all mine, all mine. TSK, this Shi Tianma seems to be quite wealthy. How could he have so many jewelry? Then, Wu Qi jumped into the well and quickly walked through a nearly mile-long secret tunnel, coming to a secret chamber that measured several hundred feet in both width and length, and was filled with numerous sandalwood racks. Just as Princess Xianglu, who was shouting and cheering excitedly, had said, there were countless treasures placed on the wooden shelves here. There were no common objects like gold or silver here, only corals, hawksbill turtles, pearls, jades, diamonds, rubies, sapphires, and other rare treasures. In the corner of the secret chamber, there were nearly 100 wooden boxes of various sizes, each of which contained a small hill of high-grade and top-grade spirit stones of various attributes. Wu Qi's eyes lit up. Among these upper-grade and even supreme-grade energy stones, all of them had 5 elements, and there were even a dozen of them, which were extremely rare. They did not have any elemental properties, but contained the purest energy essence of the sun and moon. He swallowed a mouthful of saliva, then turned to Princess Xianglu, who was holding a box of gemstones in her hand and laughing happily, and asked, how are we going to divide these energy stones? Princess Xianglu threw a glance at the 100 feet wide pile of energy stones, shook her head and said, what's the use? All these things in the secret chamber are going moldy. You can just take them all. If it is not enough, I'll send you more in 2 days. Wu Qi was rendered speechless. Suddenly, he realized that this young girl standing in front of him was the princess of Great Yan Dynasty. Although these energy stones were of high quality and great quantity, for the Great Yan Dynasty which had a history of over 2,000 years, they were just a drop in the ocean. Princess Xianglu did not care about these energy stones, but Wu Qi treasured them very much. He quickly walked over, threw away all the wooden chests, and kept all the energy stones into his storage ring. 8 ghost immortals stood in a straight line at the entrance of the secret chamber, glaring fiercely at Zhao Qinzue, Meng Xiaobai, and the others behind them. It was obvious that they were not allowed to come in. With these 8 ghost immortals guarding the entrance, no one dared to break into the secret chamber. Wu Qi and Princess Xianglu had enough time to divide all the various treasures in the secret chamber. Wu Qi focused on all kinds of energy stones and some rare objects that contained natural energies, while Princess Xianglu was beaming with joy. She reached out her hand to all the treasures that shone the brightest and had the most exquisite designs. There was a pale purple, half-transparent jade bracelet on both her left and right wrist, on which some runes could be vaguely seen blinking. They were 2 storage bracelets with a huge capacity. Princess Xianglu smilingly searched through the secret chamber and stuffed all the treasures that caught her eyes into the bracelets. While looting all the treasures in the secret chamber, Princess Xianglu gave a loud laugh and said, "I didn't expect that a mere sheer martial club could have such a rich wealth. Wu Qi, now I understand why you came to Sheer Martial Club and stirred up troubles. Why don't I mobilize the army in my fief tomorrow and confiscate all the properties in Street of Mighty Martial? TSK, where did they find a peach of immortality carved out of such a huge piece of ruby?" With an enchanting smile on her face, Princess Xianglu picked up a peach of immortality from a wooden shelf. It was as big as a bull's head, glinting brilliantly and without any blemish. It was a peach of immortality carved out of an entire piece of ruby, and its value could not be measured with money. Apart from the peach itself, there was also a tray carved into the shape of a leaf at the bottom of the peach, which was also carved out of a huge piece of flawless jade. A couple dozens of thumb-sized, perfectly round, and translucent silver pearls were rolling quickly on the leaf, looking no different from the dewdrops on the peach of immortality. Looking at the huge peach, a strange gleam flashed across Wu Qi's eyes. It contained a very strong fire element energy, and it was not just an ordinary ruby, as it could be considered as one of the most precious natural treasures. On the other hand, the jade carved into the shape of a leaf was emanating a faint aura of green wood. It was also a rare and precious item. The wood element was the source of fire, and that was the reason why the peach of immortality was glistening with a bright red glow, as if it was a living creature. On the other hand, the couple dozens of pearls were hovering on the leaf, faintly emanating a bone-piercingly cold energy essence. Surprisingly, the core of these pearls contained a thread of innate Kuei water energy essence. Not only did the energy essence nourish the leaf carved from the jade, making it look especially lustrous and translucent, it had also sealed the fire energy contained in the ruby, preventing it from spreading wantonly. Water element, wood element, fire element, white, green, and red energy intertwined with each other on the surface of this extraordinary treasure, transforming into a dense mist that enveloped the entire peach of immortality. What a treasure! I love it! Princess Xianglu narrowed her eyes, smiling so widely that the corners of her mouth and eyes curved into the shape of a crescent moon. On the other hand, Wu Qi could tell that this peach of immortality was not an ordinary decorative treasure, but a magical treasure that had gone through the preliminary refining. Only by going through the last few steps of refining, it would become a treasure that had fused the energy of water, wood, and fire elements, and could unleash innate water, wood thunder, and fire ray to injure the enemy. Judging from the overall strength Shi Tianma had shown, he did not have the ability to produce a treasure like this, and it seemed like his cultivation technique did not require any external items. All of a sudden, Yan Bugui's cautious voice was heard coming from the secret passage, "Your Highness, I, Yan Bugui, have some impression of this peach of immortality." 3 months ago, Yan Qingchen, the Prince of Yi, celebrated his 600th birthday, and his youngest son, who was enfeoffed to Enqiu, presented this peach of immortality to him. In Mount Jiayin, which is 3,000 miles away from Ji City, all the tributes were robbed by someone, and none of the 3,000 soldiers who escorted the tributes survived. This case is currently being investigated by Scouting Office. Princess Xianglu, who was having a complacent smile on her face, suddenly opened her eyes. She turned to look at Yan Bugui, who was peeking out from the secret passage, and said angrily, "What are you trying to say? This treasure belongs to me now. Since it was robbed by a thief, it is now an item without an owner. Now that I've snatched it back from the thief, it belongs to me. This is a matter of course. If anyone dares to talk nonsense, you can ask Yan Qingchen to come talk to me." Yen Bugue coughed dryly, then said carefully, I just want to tell your highness that since this peach of immortality is found here, it is highly possible that Shi Tianma is the culprit who closed the case. Most probably, the other precious treasures in this secret chamber are also looted by him from all over the place. Your highness, please understand that the value of all the precious treasures in this secret chamber is priceless. No matter how big Shi Martial Club is, it is nothing but a martial club. How could it afford to buy so many rare and precious treasures? Princess Zhangli narrowed her eyes, carefully stroking the peach of immortality in her arms. She nodded her head thoughtfully and said, Is that so? All the precious treasures in here are stolen goods. Since we can't find the culprit, we might as well put them into the national treasury. Since they are in the national treasury, they are no different from my belongings. Therefore, it is reasonable for me to take them away now. If Minister of Justice Hao Yingzhengqi is not convinced, he can ask him to come talk to me. Hugging the rare peach of immortality tightly in her arms, Princess Zhangli kept praising it. Then, she conveniently shoved it into her bracelet. In terms of seniority, Prince Yen Qingchen, was the nephew of Princess Zhangli. However, to Princess Zhangli, robbing the birthday tribute of her nephew was a matter of course, and there was nothing to be embarrassed about. As long as she had her eyes on something, it would be hers. As for the 8 governors, she could just ask them to step aside. Shaking his head, Wu Qi did not put the so-called robbery of tribute in his heart. Since Shi Tianma had the courage to kill Yen Buji, what was the big deal about robbing some tributes? Throwing away all the dazzling and glittering treasures, Wu Qi fixed his eyes on a pile of silvery white, translucent crystals on top of 2 wooden shelves at the innermost part of the secret chamber. They were shrouded in starlight and mist. He rubbed his eyes with a look of disbelief, strode to the pile of crystals. Seizing the opportunity when Princess Zhangli was not paying attention to him, Wu Qi waved his hand and shoved all over 200 silvery white crystals, ranging from the size of a human head to the size of a fist, into his storage ring. He placed them in the innermost layer of the ring, then wrapped them with a large pile of energy stones. Forcefully suppressing the excitement in his heart, Wu Qi turned to the other wooden shelves as if nothing had happened. From them, he took out some materials such as 10,000-year-old essence cold ice and shoved them into his storage ring. These materials were useless to ordinary people, and if they were carelessly touched by them, it would bring great harm to them. However, for cultivators, no matter it was crafting flying swords or unusual magical treasures, these materials were always useful. After a long while, Wu Qi finally calmed down his mind. In fact, those silvery white crystals were actually some kind of energy metal ore that was contaminated by the aura emanated from the dimensional ripples. It was called spatial breaching spirit gold, and it had a structure similar to that of a metal and a crystal. It possessed a very unique power, and it was the core material used by cultivators to construct their Immortals Cave, and to construct a super long-distance minor universal teleportation formation. A minor universal teleportation formation, with spatial breaching spirit gold as its core, could teleport a person several tens or millions of miles away. The amount of energy consumed was negligible, and the ripples of energy emanated from it were very weak as well. As for a minor universal teleportation formation without spatial breaching spirit gold as its core, it would be just like what happened to Princess Yingchuan, who had to empty the national treasury of the Lu Kingdom and consume all the high-grade energy stones in the treasury. Only then could he teleport her from the Lu Kingdom to Ji City. With over 200 pieces of spatial breaching spirit gold, if they were cut reasonably and used sparingly, it would be more than enough for Wu Qi to construct over 1,000 minor universal teleportation formations for a single person, or nearly 100 teleportation formations for 100 people. With these spatial breaching spirit gold, some of Wu Qi's ideas could be gradually put into practice. For example, he could construct a few Immortals Cave in a secret place deep within Meng Mountains. A cunning rabbit has 3 burrows, this was a key point mentioned in the Scroll of Stealing. How could any qualified thief not have at least a few dozens of backup routes of retreat? These spatial breaching spirit gold were the biggest harvest for Wu Qi today. With them, Wu Qi would finally have the confidence to survive and develop in this world. Chapter 126. After looting all the treasures in Shi Tianma's secret chamber, under the persuasion of Wu Qi, Princess Xianglu, whose eyes were flickering with a five-colored gleam, finally left behind a few stolen goods for Wu Qi, asking him to pack them up and send them to scouting office as evidence of their crimes. Apart from these precious treasures, they also found some account books, documents, and some other things in the secret chamber. However, no matter it was Wu Qi or Princess Xianglu, neither of them had any interest in them, and thus, all of them were taken away by the scouting office. Apart from the priceless treasures in the secret chamber, there were also a few warehouses in the backyard of Shi Martial Club, filled with gold ingots, silver ingots, and copper coins. After operating in Ji City for over 90 years, apart from the treasures obtained from robberies, Shi Martial Club had also earned quite a lot from its legitimate business. The total value of all the treasures found in these warehouses was at least 1 million. Wu Qi conveniently took out some gold ingots and silver ingots and put them into his storage ring, leaving the copper coins untouched. On the other hand, Princess Xianglu had completely ignored these treasures. The reason why she looted all the treasures in the secret chamber was because she found them to be very beautiful. Wu Qi and Princess Xianglu, who had their wealth increased dramatically, walked out from Shi Martial Club with a smile on their faces. They happened to see Shi Tianma squinting his pair of deep eyes, laughing at the secret agents of scouting office who were guarding him. His shoulder blades were broken, and all 36 important acupoints in his body were broken, causing all the innate energy in his body to be drained. Despite that, he still arrogantly threatened those secret agents of scouting office, saying that he would find out their relatives and kill all of them. Seeing Shi Tianma still being so arrogant despite having fallen into such a dire situation, Princess Xianglu knitted her brows, pointed her finger at him and said, "How presumptuous. Somebody, pull out all his teeth and replace them with dog teeth. Apply some 9 jade bone healing ointment on them, and let him grow a mouthful of solid dog teeth. I'd like to see how this fellow, who barks like a wild dog, is going to show himself in front of others after he grows a mouthful of dog teeth." Wu Qi shuddered. Where did Princess Xianglu learn these humiliating methods? Logically speaking, she, who was born deep in the palace, should not have come into contact with these things. The Jiuyu bone healing ointment was a secret medicine concocted by the imperial clan of Great Yan Dynasty. When one's limbs were broken, as long as the blood was still warm, the wound could be healed quickly by applying this ointment. Wu Qi pulled out Shi Tianma's teeth and gave him a mouthful of dog teeth. After that, he smeared the 9 jade bone healing ointment on them. With that, the dog teeth would fuse together with Shi Tianma's gums, and there would be absolutely no rejection. As the most renowned grandmaster in the Jianghu of Great Yan Dynasty, Shi Tianma was humiliated in such a way. If that were the case, he would never be able to face anyone again. Shi Tianma's face flickered between pale and green. He gave Princess Xianglu a fierce glare, threw his head back and roared furiously, "Forget it. I've been a man who has run amok all my life, how can I be bullied by a woman like this? Forget it, forget it. My master will definitely avenge me. All of you, just you wait. Your 9 clans will all die." After letting out 3 wild roars, Shi Tianma turned to Shi Wugo, who was tied up in the same way, and said furiously, "My son, why don't you kill yourself now? Are you going to wait for them to humiliate you like this?" Shi Wugo gave his father a look, threw his head back and cried out wildly, "Master, please avenge me and my son." All of a sudden, loud noises of countless steel bars breaking were heard coming from Shi Wugo's body. Pale green blood burst out from his 7 apertures, and in just a blink of an eye, he had lost all signs of life. Shi Tianma let out a wild cry as loud noises of thunder were heard coming from his body. After that, dark green and sticky blood sprayed out from his 7 apertures. His body twitched violently for a while, and then he too committed suicide with a mystic technique. The secret agents of scouting office standing right next to both father and son did not have the time to react, and could only watch them die with their own eyes. There were even 2 secret agents of scouting office standing too close to Shi Tianma. The blood that sprayed out from his 7 apertures sprinkled onto their arms. Like a concentrated acid, it scorched and rotted their skin, emitting a pungent smell of grass and wood. Both secret agents shrieked miserably. Greatly shocked, Wu Qi sprung forward, pulled out the sword of greedy wolf and chopped off their arms. Before their arms could touch the ground, they were burned into ashes by the green-colored blood. Everyone on the scene gasped at the same time. How could Shi Tianma's blood be able to withstand such a deadly poison? Wu Qi's eyes flickered. He stretched out his hand and pressed on the nostrils and the veins on their necks. Shaking his head, he sighed and said, "Well, they are two good men. Don't disgrace their dead bodies. Xiao Bai, bring them out of the city and bury them in a place with good feng shui." Wu Qi told Meng Xiaobai that he was going to find a place with good feng shui to bury them, but he actually transmitted his voice to Meng Xiaobai, asking him to bring the corpses out of the city and find a random place to dig a hole. After that, he would bring the corpses back and hide them in Duke Yanli's mansion. Wu Qi especially reminded Meng Xiaobai to be extra careful when he entered the city, and not let anyone notice that he brought the dead bodies back. Meng Xiaobai's expression remained unchanged. He answered and beckoned to Zhao Qinzui. A group of over 100 guards from Duke Yanli's mansion drove a large chariot, carrying the dead bodies of Shi Tianma and his son out of the city. No one from scouting office had any objection to Wu Qi's order. Since Shi Tianma and his son were dead, what was the point of keeping their dead bodies? Although the cultivation technique they were practicing was a little strange, since they were dead, they couldn't interrogate them to find out the cultivation technique they were practicing. So, what was the point of keeping their dead bodies and stewing them? Only Wu Qi was sneering in his mind. Shi Tianma and his son had committed suicide because they were unwilling to be humiliated. They might have fooled the others, but not Wu Qi. In the scroll of stealing, there were over 100 different cultivation techniques of pretending to be dead, and each of them was 1,000,000 times more advanced than the evil cultivation technique used by Shi Tianma and his son. This was the meaning of Lord Guan Yu's sword dance in front of the temple. Since both father and son wanted to pretend to be dead, Wu Qi would fulfill their wish, bringing them into Duke Yanli's mansion so that he could give them a good treatment. Upon thinking of the enormous blood and energy essence contained in the bodies of Shi Tianma and his son, Wu Qi couldn't help but drool. In order to win the trust of others and prove that they were really dead, this father and son had actually used a mystic technique to shatter their meridians, nearly wiping out all the life force in their bodies, leaving only a tiny bit of life force in their hearts. If no one came to rescue them within 72 hours, they would be dead for sure. During these 72 hours, they were really dead men, and there was no need to worry about any unforeseen events happening to them. Looking at Meng Xiaobai and the others who were leaving, Wu Qi pursed his lips into a smile. After that, he cupped his fist toward Princess Zhang in a solemn manner. "Zidan, I'm sure you've heard about what happened in Shi Martial Club." With a serious expression, Wu Qi told Princess Zhang, "I never expected that Shi Martial Club is actually a den of bandits who hide all the filthy things. Although the main culprit has committed suicide, there are still so many accomplices, and we still have a lot of things to do. I need to inform our young master about the assassination of Yan Buji, but we can't leave this place unattended. What if someone cheated and released the suspect without permission? Wouldn't all our efforts be in vain?" Gently, Wu Qi tucked back a strand of hair that fell before Princess Zhang forehead, chuckled and said, "You stay here and keep watch. Ask the men from Criminal and Justice Court and Scouting Office to investigate this case thoroughly. You must urge them to investigate this case with all their heart and soul, and find out if there are any other crimes committed by Shi Martial Club." Hearing that Wu Qi wanted her to stay here and keep watch, Princess Zhang heart was filled with reluctance. She pulled Wu Qi's sleeve and murmured in a low voice, "Wherever you go, I'll follow you. I'll leave Bai Zhuer and Bai Zuer here. With them here, who would dare to mess around?" Wu Qi smiled, then he moved closer to Princess Zhang ear and whispered, "Not only do I need to supervise Criminal and Justice Court and Scouting Office in handling this case, I also need Zidan to help me occupy such a large courtyard in this Shi Martial Club. I'm planning to open a martial club here. Without Zidan's help, no matter what, I will never be able to own this courtyard in this golden section of the road. Sighing lightly, Wuqi stared deeply into Princess Zhongli's eyes and said, Wuqi has no relatives in this world. Apart from Zidan, no one can help Wuqi handle this matter. Princess Zhongli's spirit was immediately lifted. She stuck out her chest, tilted her chin up complacently and said, So, you're the one who wants this martial club? Don't worry, Zidan will handle it properly for you. Who dares to fight me for something that I've taken a fancy to? As for this sure martial club, it will definitely belong to the Imperial Treasury. Everything in the Imperial Treasury is my property, and everything that belongs to me is yours. Wuqi narrowed his eyes and smiled, gently stroking Princess Zhongli's hair. Yen Bugui and the others were staring blankly into the sky. Everything in Great Yen Dynasty's Imperial Treasury was equal to Wuqi's property. Were they hallucinating? Although Princess Zhongli had the courage to say something like that, none of them had the courage to listen to it. They had no idea how Yen Dan would feel when he heard what his most precious granddaughter had said. What kind of thoughts would he have? The complacent Princess Zhongli simply carried a large chair and sat in the main hall of Sure Martial Club, giving orders to all the officers from Criminal and Justice Court, patrolling officers, and captains of City Defense Army who came to Sure Martial Club. With this mighty deity in charge, the Judicial Department and the Force Department in G City began to operate at an unprecedented efficiency. Very soon, according to the account books and other items found in Shi Tianma's secret chamber, they had determined that Sure Martial Club was related to many robberies that happened in the area 10,000 miles around G City in the recent decades. G City was the absolute political and economic core of Great Yen Dynasty, and all the rare and precious treasures under the heaven were gathered here. Those merchant caravans and tribute teams from various vassal kingdoms of Great Yen Dynasty would bring an astronomical amount of treasures. Sure Martial Club had been robbing for several dozens of years, and the treasures they obtained were far more than what was found in the secret chamber. Including the treasures that Wuqi and Princess Zhongli had embezzled, they only accounted for less than 1% of the total looted over the years. According to the numerous account books and documents found in the secret chamber, the mood of the officers from Criminal and Justice Court was getting more and more excited, and the atmosphere was getting tenser and tenser. The crimes committed by Sure Martial Club were far more than what they were. From the records in those account books, one could vaguely tell that there was a deeper conspiracy behind Sure Martial Club. For example, there was a pale golden account book, on which a large number of names and numbers were recorded. If they were not mistaken, this was the record of Shi Tianma bribing some officials, and it could also be the record of the merchants who helped Sure Martial Club sell the stolen goods, helping them dispose of the stolen goods. More and more elite officers from Criminal and Justice Court arrived at this place, and the elite investigators from Central Wind Guard of Scouting Office were like flies that had smelled the scent of blood. Over 30% of the patrolling officers and secret agents in G City of Great Yen Dynasty had cordoned off the entire mighty Marshall Street, while an army of several tens of thousands of elite soldiers had completely sealed off all the streets on the left side of the street. Even the city gates on all four sides of the city wall had been shut. The captured apprentices of Sure Martial Club were quickly brought away, including the personal guard of Wei Xiaoxiao, who was personally captured by Wuqi. As it was ordered by Wuqi, the security around this personal guard and a few of his attendants was extremely tight. While everything was being carried out in an orderly manner, several dozens of burly men, who were clad in the official uniform of Criminal and Justice Court and the standard soft armor of Scouting Office, suddenly struck at the same time. They drew out their weapons and hacked towards those apprentices who were being escorted, then casually chopped off their heads. It was unknown what kind of drug was applied to the weapons used by these men. After chopping off their heads, the skulls quickly burst into flames and turned into ashes in just a blink of an eye. It happened so suddenly that none of the patrolling officers and secret agents on the scene could react in time. Even the personal guard and attendant of Wei Xiaoxiao who were captured by Wuqi had their heads chopped off by someone. Sparks burst out in all directions, and their heads were quickly burned into ashes. Chapter 127. It all happened too suddenly. After those capable men, who were clad in official outfits, casually swung their blades and killed several dozens of disciples and instructors, they began to attack anyone in their line of sight. No one had expected that the men from Criminal and Justice Court and Scouting Office would suddenly do something like this. In just a few seconds, over 300 patrolmen and secret agents of Criminal and Justice Court had died under the blades. When the surrounding people finally reacted, the beast warriors of Scouting Office let out long and furious roars, transforming into the shadows of beast souls behind their backs and leaping forward, but these men, with their faces expressionless, raised their blades and chopped at their own necks. A couple dozens of streams of blood sprayed out, as they had actually chopped off their own heads. Countless patrolmen and secret agents in the surroundings could not help but gasp at the same time. Not only were they ruthless to others, they were also extremely ruthless to themselves. Men of sacrifice, no doubt about it. Who was the person who could cultivate such men of sacrifice? What was even more frightening was that these men of sacrifice had already blended into the judicial system of Great Yen Dynasty. Who was the person who could have such a heaven-defying method to plant so many men of sacrifice in Criminal and Justice Court and Scouting Office? All the disciples and instructors of the Martial Club who were killed by them had their heads burned into ashes, and no one could identify their faces and origins. It was obvious that they were trying to silence all the witnesses. But, who could be so efficient as to give the order to silence all the witnesses right after Sher Martial Club was raided? Perhaps he had lost his mind, as an official from Criminal and Justice Court suddenly cried out in a loud voice, "Protect Her Highness, protect Princess Xianglu." Just as the official, who was eager to show his loyalty, let out a loud cry, Princess Xianglu gave him a slap on the face and knocked him several hundred feet away. He coughed out a mouthful of blood and fainted on the spot. Disgustedly, Princess Xianglu gazed at the unlucky official, clenched her teeth and said in a cold voice, "Do I need to be protected by a bunch of useless fools?" "Humph, good, very good. Criminal and Justice Court and Scouting Office, I can't believe there is someone among you who is colluding with the bandits. Inform Haoying Zhengqi and Qin Qing Shui, and ask them to apologize to my imperial grandfather." She stomped her feet and glanced at the head and half-body of Wei Xiaoxiao's guard who was captured by Wu Qi. With a frown, Princess Xianglu said, "Send someone to inform Vice Premier Gao Jianli that the people from Criminal and Justice Court and Scouting Office are no longer reliable. Send the men of Swallow here, and everyone here, investigate the bloodline of 6 generations and all the interpersonal relationships. Everyone, listen to this Empress. Keep a close eye on the colleagues around you. Whoever dares to wander around will be killed without mercy. If there are any mistakes, blame the 3 clans." Many of the officials present responded loudly, but their faces were as pale as snowflakes. Gao Jianli was in charge of the Swallow, a secret spy organization that was independent of all the government offices in Great Yen Dynasty. For so many years, no one knew what the Swallow had done, but everyone knew of its fearsome reputation. When Princess Xianglu sent someone to inform Gao Jianli, asking him to take over the management of this place, the incident had really blown up. In just the time to finish a pot of tea, Qin Qing Shui arrived with a large group of secret agents. His pale donkey face was filled with an unconcealable panic. With the quickest speed he could muster, he came before Princess Xianglu and cried out sternly, "Your Highness Xianglu, just let me investigate this thoroughly. Why bother Vice Premier Gao Jianli?" Princess Xianglu gazed at Qin Qing Shui from the corner of her eyes, then shook her head disdainfully. Qin Qing Shui's face turned ashen, as if all his spirit, energy, and spirit were sucked out in an instant. He nearly fell to the ground. With Gao Jianli intervening, and the Swallow taking over the investigation, wouldn't the Central Wind Guard of Scouting Office be thoroughly investigated? Oh heaven, during the years when Qin Qing Shui was in charge of the Central Wind Guard, he had done too many shameful things, and it was too late for him to cover them up now. When these men of sacrifice attacked to silence the witness, Wu Qi had already arrived at Zhuoguozheng Mansion, and came straight to the main hall. The emissary of the Gao Ling Kingdom was being pressed to the ground by a group of ferocious servants of Zhuoguozheng Mansion, who were using an iron wooden stick as thick as a bowl to slap his buttocks. A low-ranking official was standing beside him and counting. Meanwhile, a few middle-ranking officials of Zhuoguozheng Mansion were standing at the side, loudly reproaching the emissary of the Gao Ling Kingdom for his crimes. From disrespecting the suzerain kingdom to shouting in the court, there were at least 17 to 18 crimes. Each crime was punished with 30 strokes of the stick. With over 500 strokes of the stick, perhaps this emissary of the Gao Ling kingdom would be beaten to death. A group of guards with swords drawn were standing guard outside the main hall, surrounding the emissary and his personal guards, not allowing them to move. The people of the Gao Ling kingdom were looking at the emissary being punished with a pale face, panicking and not knowing what to do. Wu Qi gave these people a cold glance, then strode into the main hall. The law of the jungle was the law of the jungle, and it was even more so between kingdoms. In the main hall, Lu Qingfeng, the emissary of the Lishan kingdom, and Princess Ying Chuan were laughing together. The cooperation agreement between the three parties had been reached. Wu Qi directly picked up the agreement before Lu Qingfeng. The general idea of the agreement was as follows: the Lu kingdom and the Lishan kingdom would join forces and attack the Gao Ling kingdom, seize the control of the gold mine, and inflict as much damage as possible to the Gao Ling kingdom's national strength. It would be the best if they could wipe out the main force of the Gao Ling kingdom's army. After conquering at least 8 counties of the Gao Ling kingdom, the conquered territory, together with a part of the Lu kingdom's territory, would become the territory of Tai clan, Marquis Yuanyang of the Lu kingdom. After Marquis Yuanyang established his own kingdom, Lu Qingfeng would officially put it on record in Zhuoguozheng Mansion. After Tai clan established his kingdom, he would be on friendly terms with the Lu kingdom and the Lishan kingdom for generations to come. Once Tai clan's kingdom was stabilized, the three kingdoms would join forces and divide the remaining territory of the Gao Ling kingdom. These were the general terms of the agreement. There were nearly 100 other detailed rules, detailing the obligations and responsibilities that all three parties would have to bear when they joined forces to conquer the Gao Ling kingdom, as well as the share of profits that they would enjoy in the end. Through a small communication formation constructed in Zhuoguozheng Mansion, the Lu kingdom, the Lishan kingdom, and Tai clan, the three parties must have already begun to mobilize their armies and contact each other. Perhaps the emissary of the Gao Ling kingdom had noticed something was not right, and thus, he immediately quarreled with Lu Qingfeng in the court, which gave Lu Qingfeng the chance to stir up some trouble, and was ordered to give him a severe beating. With such a brutal beating, it would be a piece of cake for the emissary of the Gao Ling kingdom to remain unconscious, and it would not be surprising for him to be beaten to death. By the time he used the secret communication channel of the Gao Ling kingdom to send the news back to his kingdom, perhaps the armies of all three parties would have long arrived at the Gao Ling kingdom. Princess Ying Chuan was in a very good mood. She looked at Lu Qingfeng with a smile on her face, and was thinking whether her charm was too strong, which was the reason why Lu Qingfeng could come up with such a suggestion right before she paid him a visit. The three parties had joined forces and dismembered the Gao Ling kingdom, the mortal enemy of the Lu kingdom. Not only could they dismember it, they could also seize a large piece of land, and even have a share of the precious mineral vein. This was much better than the plan she had when she came to the Gao Ling kingdom. After giving a peach in return, Princess Ying Chuan happily pondered over the terms and conditions of the alliance between the three parties. Smilingly, she gave Lu Qingfeng a wink and said, "Duke Yanluo, Ying Chuan has something important to report to Duke Yanluo. It is related to your biological father, Duke Buji." The emissary of the Lishan kingdom had a pair of sharp eyes. Upon seeing Princess Ying Chuan's bashful expression, he rose hastily and bid his farewell. The relationship between the Lu kingdom and Tai clan was very close to the Lishan kingdom, so naturally, they knew it very well. Since Princess Ying Chuan had brought up the matter related to Yan Buji, it was obvious that she wanted to use this matter to ease the conflict between the Lu kingdom and Tai clan. If the emissary were to stay here any longer, it would be a little inconsiderate. Lu Qingfeng personally sent the emissary off from Zhuoguozheng Mansion, only then did he return to the main hall. He turned to look at Princess Ying Chuan with a smile and said, "I wonder what's the matter, Princess?" "It is related to my father." "Don't tell me that Lu Suifeng is also the son of my father and princess." At this moment, Lu Qingfeng made fun of Princess Ying Chuan. Princess Ying Chuan blushed, winked at Lu Qingfeng coquettishly, smiled and said, "What are you talking about? How could Duke Buji fall in love with a girl like Ying Chuan?" Princess Ing Chuan straightened her face, then said with a solemn expression, Ing Chuan has to apologize to Duke Yenlu first. My son Sui Feng has offended Duke Yenlu with his rude behavior. I hope you can forgive him. Lu Qingfeng waved his hand indifferently and said, Never mind, I've already forgotten all those things. Princess, you don't have to wonder why I would come to an agreement with you today. It's just that the Gao Ling Kingdom has a rather strong national strength among all the vassal kingdoms in the west. How could Tai clan possibly swallow such a big piece of fat meat? There is no grudge between Princess and me. Naturally, I understand what is the most beneficial choice I have to make. Princess Ing Chuan was taken aback, then she quickly said, But, Ing Chuan, the matter here is. Wu Qi interrupted Princess Ing Chuan. Wu Qi had already told Lu Qingfeng everything about what Lao Ai told her. Both of them were unwilling to waste their breath on this matter. If they really heard Princess Ing Chuan telling Lu Qingfeng that Shi Martial Club was the one who carried out the assassination of Yan Buji, then they would owe him a favor for no reason. So, why bother? Casually throwing out Yan Buji's token, Wu Qi said with a stern voice, Young master, today, Wu Qi went to the martial club that we had our eyes on last time to challenge it, planning to seize its foundation and open a martial club in Ji City for young masters' use. In the end, I found this token in the secret chamber of Shi Martial Club. Shi Martial Club should be the culprit behind the assassination of Duke Buji. Lu Qingfeng turned pale with fright and leaped to his feet. What? Shi Martial Club is just a common martial club. How could they have such audacity? Princess Ing Chuan turned pale with fright as well. She cried out with a sharp voice, What? Why did you do that to Shi Martial Club? How did you? Looking at the token thrown out by Wu Qi and engraved with the words Duke Yan Buji, Princess Ing Chuan was struck dumb and couldn't say a word. Didn't the sect leader of Great Sun Sect, Lao Ai, in her mind, tell her that not even the scouting office had discovered the shady dealings of Shi Martial Club? In Ji City, was it only Lao Ai who had vaguely realized that Shi Martial Club was not as simple as it seemed? How could this opportunity to repair the relationship between the Lu Kingdom and Tai clan slip away from her hands just like that? Had Wu Qi really done something to Shi Martial Club? And he even found out the evidence of Shi Martial Club assassinating Yan Buji? Princess Ing Chuan felt a buzzing noise ringing in her head. What Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng had done was like a stick that had knocked on her head, making her feel dizzy and had no idea where she was for a long time. Intentionally, Wu Qi did not look at Princess Ing Chuan, whose face had turned pale. He just repeated everything that happened today to Lu Qingfeng. According to his description, he and Lu Qingfeng had already had the ambition to attack Shi Martial Club half a month ago, and it was only today that they borrowed the power of Princess Zhang Lu and attacked Shi Martial Club. While both men were playing the same trick, Princess Ing Chuan's beautiful face turned gloomy, and she did not know what she was feeling in her heart. It was such a good opportunity to make friends with Lu Qingfeng, how could it slip away just like that? They had already caught the culprit, yet she still told them that Shi Tianma was the one who assassinated Yan Buji. What was the point of telling them this? Right at this moment, a troop of soldiers, clad in black iron armor and shrouded in a cold aura and expressionless faces, rushed into the hall. The captain who led the troop gave the hall a glance, then cried out in a deep voice, Where is Marquis Tianyun, Wu Qi? Chief General Jing Ke summons you. Chapter 128. 500 miles north of Ji City, there was a dense forest that measured several hundred miles in circumference. This forest had been growing for several thousand years, and giant trees that were over 1,000 feet tall could be found everywhere. Wisterias grew luxuriantly in the forest, and countless exotic flowers and grasses could be seen growing in it. There were even a few excellent quality energy veins running underneath the ground. Usually, the forest would be shrouded in white mist, with white cranes and green sparrows flying back and forth in the sky. Snakes and dragons would appear and disappear from time to time. According to the common people in Ji City, there were immortals living in this forest. No matter what kind of rumors were spread by the common people, it was a fact that this forest was a forbidden land controlled by the army of Great Yen Dynasty. Under the lead of the group of armored soldiers, Wu Qi sprinted at top speed for nearly 10 minutes. Relying on the extremely fast speed of his mount, he finally arrived at the edge of this nameless forest. Upon approaching the woods, Wu Qi felt uneasy all over his body. The combat instinct inherited from Wu Wang told Wu Qi that there were people hiding in every corner of this place. They and their group had been locked down by at least a couple dozens of large machines, and there were at least 300 pairs of eyes locked onto them. The defense was extremely tight, even tighter than the defense of the imperial palace of Great Yen Dynasty. Wu Qi glanced to the left and right. He could vaguely sense a few small mounds on both sides of the road, which seemed to be the hidden firing points. Apart from that, he couldn't find anything strange. The captain raised a pale green token high up in the air and injected his inner force into it. Immediately, a clear and melodious cry of swallows soared into the sky. A few whistles were heard coming from a distance. The captain gave out an order, and the group of soldiers continued riding along the road into the dense forest. At the same time, the gaze that he sensed had also disappeared without a trace. The road in the dense forest was only about 20 feet wide. Both sides of the road were surrounded by giant trees and long grasses. From time to time, a large group of monkeys would jump from one side of the road to the other side of the road, chirping noisily while throwing a few fruit cores to Wu Qi and his company. A large flock of birds were gliding across the sky gracefully, and large sheets of bird droppings were falling down like raindrops, staining everyone's face and head. Fortunately, Wu Qi was protected by his innate energy. The bird droppings were deflected away when they were still a few feet away from him. However, they caused the soldiers around him to have dozens more bird droppings on them. After walking along the main road for a dozen miles, two fierce tigers rubbed their bodies against each other. Then, they came out from the bushes with two cubs that were obviously still drinking milk. They lazily lay down on the main road and basked in the sun. The group had no choice but to walk down the main road and detour around the family of four through the forest at the side before continuing on the main road. In the end, they hadn't even walked a few miles when a group of wild boars ran across the road with sharp cries of joy. Smoke and dust billowed, and they were immediately delayed again. Finally, this group of huge wild boars crossed the main road and walked for about 20 miles. Then, 7 or 8 huge pythons, which were as thick as water buckets, covered with white scales, had a horn on their heads, and claws could be vaguely seen under their abdomens, blocked their way, and were about to transform into flood dragons. These huge pythons were curled up lazily on the main road. The sun shone down through the branches that had been cut above the main road, making them feel very comfortable. They kept sticking out their long tongues. This time, even Wu Qi couldn't help but be shocked. The fierce tigers and wild boars were just ordinary wild beasts, but their bodies were especially strong, and the blood and qi in their bodies were more than 10 times stronger than their kind on Earth. However, they were just wild beasts. These 7 or 8 huge pythons were about to transform into flood dragons, and there was a faint pressure coming from them that made Wu Qi's heart tremble with fear. They had already formed the Jin Dan in their bodies. If their bloodline was a little lower, they would be able to transform into human forms, just like the Xiong brothers. However, these pythons were huge in size, and their bloodline was that of flood dragons. Therefore, it was much more difficult for them to transform into human forms than the Xiong brothers. According to Wu Qi's estimation, unless they survived the thunder tribulation and transformed into flood dragons, then cultivated to the nascent soul realm and molted at least 2 times, these pythons would be able to transform into human forms. But even now, their strength was much stronger than that of ordinary Jin Dan human immortals. These pythons coiled up on the main road, staring at Wu Qi and the others with their intelligent eyes. There was actually a hint of unruly and cunning in their eyes. They put on a posture that said Lao Tzu would not give way, stretched their bodies lazily, and stuck out their tongues proudly at Wu Qi and the others. Without a choice, Wu Qi and the others could not afford to offend this group of big bosses. They could only lead their mounts down the main road and take a detour to pass through this section of the main road. As they continued forward, Wu Qi's horizons were broadened. He saw many strange beasts and demons. In particular, there was an old turtle with a shell of over 30 feet in circumference. It had also formed a Yao core, and had gained sentience and intelligence. However, it foolishly mistook itself for a monkey. It shook its shell and chased a group of monkeys climbing up and down a tree. The funny scene made Wu Qi speechless, while the armored soldiers who accompanied them were laughing in a deep voice. The captain turned his head and whispered to Wu Qi, "This old turtle is old Mister's favorite pet. He has been following old Mister since the founding of Great Yan Dynasty. But, his brain was damaged when he was transcending the Thunder Tribulation. Therefore, his behavior is a little absurd. You will get used to it." "This turtle is old Mister's pet." "Who is old Mister?" asked Wu Qi hastily. The captain answered naturally, "Oh, he is old Mr. Mod, the founding patriarch of Mo sect. His Majesty, Chief General, and Deputy Prime Minister have all acknowledged him as their master. Therefore, we all address him as old Mister. Old Mister likes nature. In this Mo forest, apart from this main road, no one is allowed to touch even a single blade of grass or tree. Therefore, the vegetation here is rich and beautiful, and there are many animals here. Just the number of demon immortals in Mo sect alone is at least several hundred." He pointed at the road where they came from, smiled bitterly and said, "Those few big bugs that blocked our way just now are the inner sect disciples of Mo sect. They are extremely spoiled by old Mister, and they love to play with us. We can't afford to offend them, so we can only let them do whatever they want. Fortunately, Mo sect has a strict rule. Apart from playing with us, they have not done anything evil. Don't be fooled by their ferocious appearance, as they are actually herbivores." "Herbivores?" Wu Qi shook his head. Then, he suddenly realized what he had just heard. Mod, the founding patriarch of Mo sect. But, Wu Qi was puzzled. According to the records in the books that Lu Xiaobai had read, Mod should not have any relationship with Great Yan Dynasty. Why was he here in Great Yan Dynasty? And he was the teacher of Yan Dan, Jing Ku, and a few other people? Very soon, Wu Qi threw this question to the back of his mind. He had yet to figure out why Yan Dan, Jing Ku, and a few other people would appear in this world, so why would he care about the reason why old Mr. Mod came here? Perhaps, he had taken a liking to Yan Dan and Jing Ku, and that was the reason why he built Mo sect here. Along the way, figures of men gradually appeared on both sides of the main road. They were men clad in coarse linen clothes, their hair disheveled, and their feet bare. They were carrying iron axes and baskets, harvesting all kinds of mushrooms and wild vegetables in the woods, chopping down those dead trees and bundling them into bundles of firewood. Their clothes were simple and crude, and their bodies were skinny. But, their faces were rosy, and an indescribable joyful expression could be seen on their faces. They were walking through the woods, yet it was as if they had blended into one with the woods. When they breathed, the woods breathed, and when they laughed, the woods laughed. Every single move they made was following the trajectory of some heaven and earth. The aura of nature made Wu Qi's heart skip a beat. These men had different cultivation bases. The weakest one was an ordinary mortal, without any internal energy, while the strongest one was at the level of respiration tier of Xiantian realm. However, regardless of their cultivation base, they had blended into the woods naturally. This was something that even Wu Qi, who had formed 2 Jin Dan in his water meridian, could not achieve. It sounded simple to say that one had to harmonize with nature, but one would know how difficult it was to actually do it. At least, when Wu Qi met Nye Baihong and the other human immortals of Jin Dan realm, they were shrouded in surging strange signs, which made them completely incompatible with the nature. They were constantly being pushed and suppressed by the nature, so how could they ever harmonize with the nature? However, these men with low cultivation base had easily achieved this. When they saw Wu Qi and his company passing by, these men, who came to the roadside with bundles of firewood, greeted them with a smile on their faces. One after another, the iron-armored soldiers cupped their fists and returned the greeting, not daring to show any arrogance. The captain said in a low voice, "They are the disciples of Mo sect. Don't be fooled by the fact that some of them have low cultivation base, as their abilities are not limited to martial strength. Any one of them who walks out from the Mo forest possesses the ability to increase the overall strength of an army by a few times. In fact, the few strongest armies of Great Yen Dynasty have their disciples from Mo sect providing them with advice and strategies." Wu Qi nodded his head silently. This was what they meant by organization. Not only did old Mr. Mod know how to love with impartiality and not attack, he was also a famous educator and strategist. They walked along the main road for a long distance, and when the sun was setting in the west and the bright red sunlight shone upon the Mo forest, Wu Qi finally came to a clearing in the heart of the Mo forest. Upon arriving at this place, Wu Qi took a deep breath and stared blankly at an incredible building in front of him. The clearing in the forest was about 100 miles in circumference, and it included a few hills, a few small rivers, and a small lake. Between the hills, rivers, and lakes, a large number of villages constructed from logs were scattered in a picturesque manner. Every single house fit perfectly with the surrounding environment, without any sense of awkwardness or awkwardness. Many disciples of Mo sect, clad in shabby clothes, were carrying out the last work of the day. Some had just walked out from the fields, some were climbing out from the river with baskets of fish in their hands, and some were carrying all kinds of tools, happily walking out from the surrounding woods. Amidst this natural and harmonious village, a purple flame pillar, several tens of feet in diameter, shot straight up into the sky from the ground. Hovering 1,000 feet above the ground, this earth-core flame pillar, which contained an endless and frightening heat, was holding up a steel city, measuring several miles in circumference. On the smooth surface of the city, which was purely constructed from steel, countless huge runes could be vaguely seen, glinting with the same gleam as the purple flame pillar. This is... Wu Qi was struck dumb. The city was not big, measuring several miles in circumference. In this world, it could only be considered as the smallest city, the size of a sesame seed or a mung bean. But, as this city, measuring several miles in circumference, was entirely constructed from steel, the workload was simply too great. It was not a big deal if it was constructed from steel, as with the national strength of Great Yen Dynasty, it was a piece of cake to construct a city like this. But, for it to hover 1,000 feet above the ground, according to the inheritance in Scroll of Stealing, only an immortal of at least Heaven Immortal realm could achieve this. Could it be that there was a Heaven Immortal in Mo sect? Tilting his head up and staring blankly at the city, Wu Qi let his mount bring him towards the direction of the city. Chapter 129. Soon, Wu Qi and his companions arrived at the bottom of the steel city. When they were still about 1 mile away from the purple-red flame pillar, Wu Qi could already feel a scorching heat coming right at his face, and a scorching smell came from his hair. The innate true fire energy in his fire meridians was activated, absorbing the heat from the surroundings and quickly transforming it into true fire energy, which flowed through his body. Instantly, he felt a cool sensation coming from his body. A rope ladder was hanging down from above, and the leader of the group grabbed the rope ladder and began climbing up step by step. Wu Qi let out a clear cry and sprung up into the sky. With a few light kicks on the rope ladder with the tip of his feet, he had already climbed up to the steel city. Down below, the soldiers hurriedly brought their impatient mounts and retreated into the distance. The heat from the underground fire was too strong, and it was not suitable for them to stay here for long. Only when they reached the top of the city did Wu Qi get a clear view of the steel city. The city was roughly circular, with a diameter of 3 miles. The huge disc-shaped base was about 1,000 feet thick, and the top of the city was of flat ground. All kinds of buildings were built here and there were countless flower beds and bushes, hiding these buildings under the shade of greenery. However, the heat from the underground fire was too strong, and all the flowers and trees were fire elemental plants. Among them, there were many fire elemental spirit herbs, and they were all thousands of years old. There were already a few men in hemp garments waiting at the exit of the rope ladder. Seeing Wu Qi quickly leaping up, a tall man with a simple and honest expression bowed to Wu Qi and said with a deep voice, "Chief General has been waiting for a long time. Mr. Wu Qi, please follow me." Before Wu Qi could answer, the man smiled, turned and walked towards a tall tower made of pure metal in the center of the city. This tower was 1,080 feet tall, and according to the number of heavenly dipper and earthly evils, it was divided into 108 floors. The tower had 12 corners, which corresponded to the number of 12 yuan chens. There were a total of 3,650 bronze bells ringing in the wind, which also corresponded to the number of stars in the sky. Wu Qi observed with his spirit eyes, and found that this tower was aimed right at the underground fire pillar right below the city. For this pillar of fire to be able to support such a city made of pure steel and midair, it could be seen that it contained absolute power. Such a huge amount of power was restrained within the tower, flowing rapidly along the countless array patterns within the tower. This tower was the core of this steel city's array formation, and the powerful energy contained within it could be transformed into a terrifying attack at any time to kill the enemy. According to Wu Qi's estimation, the underground fire energy contained in this tower was approximately equal to the total power possessed by 1,000 human immortals of Jing Dan. Such a large city was like a storage battery, with an enormous amount of underground fire energy stored in the tower as the core. Once all the energy was released at the same time, the instantaneous lethality was more than enough to kill an earth immortal of nascent soul realm. Even celestial immortals who had formed their nascent divinities, low-level celestial immortals, could be severely wounded. This was an extremely powerful weapon of mass destruction. In fact, it was the prototype of a magic treasure. It was just that he didn't know who had the ability to borrow the flames from the Earth's core to create such a huge magic treasure. Looking at the tower, Wu Qi could not help but feel his mouth watering, and could not help but keep swallowing a mouthful of saliva. The man brought Wu Qi all the way to the bottom of the tower, and entered through a door that was carved with the painting of fishing, herding, farming, and forest in 4 seasons. The interior of the tower was completely empty, without any furnishings. The ground was inlaid with various metal alloy threads, and countless fire element energy stones were densely packed on top of it. There was no staircase in the tower, and there was only a round hole, about 10 feet in diameter, in the middle of the floor of each floor. A faint red light shone out from the bottom of the tower through the hole, shooting straight into all the floors above. Following the man into the faint red light, Wu Qi felt his body lightened. He flew up along with the red light, and suddenly arrived at the highest floor of the tower. Clad in a black robe, Jing Ku was sitting in a corner of this floor, overlooking the beautiful scenery of the sunset through the window. 2 large wine jars were placed right next to him. While admiring the beautiful scenery, he scooped out some fine wine from a large white jade wine funnel and poured it into his mouth. A strong smell of alcohol emanated from his body, and even the pores on his face were enlarged. It was unknown how much wine he had drunk, as his face had turned so red that it looked like blood was going to ooze out from it. In other places, Jing Ku was a man of great character who attracted the attention of many people. However, in this tower, there was a middle-aged man who sat in the center of an array in the south position. He was like a bright pearl or a beautiful jade, attracting the attention of all the people. Just by sitting there, Wu Qi had no choice but to place all his attention on him. The middle-aged man had a delicate and handsome face, and a long beard grew on his chin. His facial features were not outstanding, but his eyes were extremely bright. They were tens of times brighter than the North Star that Wu Qi saw on Earth, under the unpolluted night sky of the Sahara Desert. Although it was a pair of bright eyes, they did not give off any aggressive feeling. Instead, they were as clear as water. When Wu Qi looked into his eyes, he felt his entire body relax, and he could not help but reveal a pleased smile. "Old Mr. M.O.D. Greetings from Wu Qi." Looking at the man, Wu Qi knew instinctively that he was M.O.D. His facial features were not outstanding, his stature was not tall or mighty, and he did not emanate any overbearing aura either. Even his dressing was similar to that of his disciples, barefooted, wearing a coarse linen shirt, and with a few strands of black soil under his fingernails. He looked no different from an old farmer in the countryside. But, he was Mod, and Wuqi would never mistake him for someone else. For some unknown reason, Mod's image suddenly overlapped with the impression that Wu Wang gave to Wuqi. Both of them had a kind of warmth that made Wuqi feel at ease, safe, and comfortable, like the wings of a mother bird protecting a little bird in a stormy night. Wuqi felt his eyes turning sour, and 2 drops of tears suddenly rolled down his cheeks. With utmost respect, he dropped to his knees and gave Mod a few kowtows. Jing Ke gulped down a mouthful of wine from the white jade wine dipper, then turned to Mod and asked, "Teacher, what do you think of this little fellow?" Mod gazed deeply at Wuqi with his pair of bright eyes, then glanced at the 2 drops of tears rolling down Wuqi's cheeks. He nodded slowly and said, "He is a good boy. What a pitiful and good boy. Although he is a little cruel and merciless, he still has a pure and innocent heart. He is a good boy that I can rest assured about." Mod stretched his hand out and gently lifted Wuqi up from the ground. Mod waved his hand and said with a smile, Come sit beside me." Wuqi wiped away his tears, walked to Mod with a solemn expression, and sat down on the empty ground beside him. Jing Ke seemed to be satisfied with Mod's answer. When Mod said that Wuqi was a good boy, the cold murderous intent in his eyes had vanished without a trace, and was replaced by a gentle look. He gave Wuqi a gentle look. It seemed like he had put down some thoughts in his mind. He grabbed the white jade wine dipper and poured a few cups of wine into the wine vat, then gulped them down happily. After that, he let out a loud burp. Mod sat quietly on the ground, with 3 pitch-black stone tablets hovering quietly in the air in front of him. He was performing some incantation gestures with both hands, and a ball of purple flame was burning ragingly in the air, crazily burning the 3 stone tablets. Dazzling golden gleams and purple mists kept bursting out from the stone tablets, and countless runes could be vaguely seen on them. From time to time, deep, muffled thunderclaps could be heard, shaking the entire pagoda. Wuqi recognized the origin of this purple flame. It was the acquired purple flame of Swan Ni, purified from the primordial poisonous flame from the earth core that had existed for millions of years. It had the magical power to break all kinds of restrictive spells, and was the best choice for cultivators below the realm of heaven immortal to forcibly break all kinds of formations and restrictive spells. For example, if one found a box containing some treasures, but it was sealed with several dozens of restrictive spells, and without any spell or incantation gestures, the best and most direct choice was to use the acquired purple flame of Swan Ni to break the restrictive spells with brute force. Judging from the way the 3 stone tablets were burned by the purple flame, the golden gleams and purple mists kept leaking out, and the thunderclaps kept ringing out, it was obvious that more than half of the restrictive spells in the stone tablets had been broken. Wuqi was very familiar with these 3 stone tablets, as he had been carrying them in the woods of Meng Mountains for nearly a month. They were the stone tablets that Yen Bugui and the others seized from the barbarians. No wonder after they arrived at Ji City, Yen Bugui never mentioned about the 3 stone tablets that Jing Ke had placed a bounty on. Apparently, they had been delivered to Mod, and he was using brute force to break the restrictive spells on them. Wuqi could not help but feel curious. What exactly was inside these stone tablets? Mod performed a few incantation gestures and released them towards the ball of purple flame. After that, he turned to look at Wuqi with a smile and said, "I've met many young men. You're a good boy, but you have too many worries in your heart. You need to relax in the future. I heard that your master was attacked and killed in Meng Mountains, and you were saved by someone there. Let bygones be bygones. Young man, you need to look forward. The world is a big place, and there are many wonderful things in it. Compared to us, you're still too young. Grudges should never be everything for a young man." Mod's words were not filled with any great principles. He talked leisurely with Wuqi, just like an uncle from next door. Strangely enough, Wu Qi felt that the stagnant feeling in his heart, as well as the uneasiness and panic he felt after he came to this world, had completely vanished. His heart was filled with peace and tranquility. Just like that, he kept chatting with Mod until the moon hung high up in the sky. 36 consecutive claps of thunder were heard, as the 3 black stone tablets unleashed an endless stream of golden specks that drifted in all directions. Abruptly, the stone tablets broke apart, turning into several thousand jade slips that were as thin as cicadas' wings, 3 feet long and as wide as a thumb, hovering in the air. These jade slips were densely packed with runes the size of soybeans, and each of them was glinting with a magical and magnificent purple glow. Mod looked at these runes, smiled delightfully and said, "All right, Yan Dan's reincarnation technique of 9 deaths and 9 lives has been completed. Jingku, there are 3 chapters of the Supreme White Sun-Piercing Dragon technique, which you are cultivating, and you only lack the last chapter. With that, you can complete your cultivation technique." These are the sword techniques of Earth Element, the Mountain-Crumbling Sword technique, and the Sky-Burning Sword technique, which Heaven-Breaking Sword sect lacks. Wonderful, the inheritance of Heaven-Breaking Sword sect has been completed. Wu Qi did not pay any attention to the cultivation techniques of the reincarnation technique of 9 deaths and 9 lives and the Supreme White Sun-Piercing Dragon technique. Instead, he quickly glanced through the Mountain-Crumbling Sword technique and the Sky-Burning Sword technique, quickly memorizing the cultivation formula. There were 36 diagrams of cultivation routes in both sword techniques, and over 7,000 words of the cultivation formula. With the amazing innate ability of Lu Xiaobai, Wu Qi easily branded the 2 sword techniques deeply into his mind. However, he found it strange that the cultivation technique cultivated by Yan Dan and Jing Ku, as well as the secret cultivation technique of Heaven-Breaking Sword sect, would appear in the ancestral stone tablets secretly inherited by barbarians. Could it be that they were robbed by the ancestors of those barbarians? There was a great mystery in this matter, and he had to find out more about it. Before Wu Qi could figure out the mystery, Mod's forehead was already covered in cold sweat. He nodded at Wu Qi, smiled and said, "Wu Qi, if you're free, you should come here and take a look. You're a good kid. Jing Ku, bring these back to Ji City, and don't come to me again within 3 months." Jing Ku gave Mod a kowtow, then rolled up his sleeve and kept all the jade slips. After that, he called out to Wu Qi, and both of them quickly left the tower. When they walked out from the tower, Wu Qi turned his head and saw Mod standing on the top floor of the tower, nodding his head and smiling at him. Chapter 130. Taking a deep breath, Jing Ku shook his head and said, "Therefore, the title of Marquis Tianyun has 2 reasons. Firstly, it's to thank you for enlightening us. Secondly, it's because of Princess Xianglu. She can't really mix around with an unknown hanger-on. Although we don't take things like status and clans seriously, we are still us. We can't force so many people in Great Yan Dynasty to think the same way as us." A few wild beasts and insects were caught by Jing Ku when they were running a little slower, and were thrown several hundred feet away, smashing into towering trees and making them dizzy, unable to stand up for a long time. Suddenly, Wu Qi realized that no matter it was these wild beasts, including the few great pythons who were about to transform into flood dragons, all of them were despicable wretches. Although they were being bullied by Jing Ku in such a violent manner, they were still bowing and flattering him. Looking at Jing Ku with surprise, Wu Qi knitted his brows and said, "Chief General, Wu Qi, have never done anything that goes against the heaven and reason. Is there a need for you to do this?" Wei Xiao. Jing Ku's face darkened instantly. He sneered and nodded his head, "That little girl. I don't like her." Wu Qi nodded his head disapprovingly. Jing Ku was in control of Great Yan Dynasty's scouting office, and Lu Qingfeng had suddenly taken over the title of Duke of Yan Lu and Zhuguozheng. If he didn't carefully investigate the background of Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng, this chief general of Great Yan Dynasty, he would be too incompetent. The measures taken in Little Meng City could fool the numerous secret agents of the Lu Kingdom, but they could never fool the men of Scouting Office. It was reasonable for Jing Ku and his men to know about Wu Qi's art of training soldiers. Seeing Wu Qi nod his head and agree to it, Jing Ku said, "We won't interfere in the matters between you and Princess Xianglu, including His Majesty. But, you have to be careful of the Crown Prince. For the Crown Prince, Princess Xianglu is not just a daughter." After a long period of silence, Jing Ku said, "Your technique of training soldiers is unique and ingenious. It is much better than the current strategy of Great Yan Dynasty. I suppose that master of yours is also a hermit, but too bad." Shaking his head, Jing Ku said, "You know how to train soldiers, and your skill in training them is so exquisite. This makes you worthy for us to take good care of you." Currently, the young masters and princes of Great Yan Dynasty were good at eating, drinking, playing, killing, visiting prostitutes, and so on. But, if you want them to do something serious, there was no hope for them, and they were not reliable at all. Over 2,000 years, Great Yan Dynasty has been founded for over 2,000 years. Wu Qi was silent. He frowned. No wonder Yan Dan was so eager to give the Xiongqing brothers to him. However, even without Xiongqing and his brothers, would he, Wu Qi, be so easy to kill? Putting aside the fact that he had already formed the Jin Dan, before he formed the Jin Dan, no earth immortal of nascent soul realm would make a move. As long as he spared no cost and burned his blood essence to escape, no one would be able to stop him. Jing Ku had a strange expression on his face. He pondered for a while, then slowly said, "We've learned about what happened between you and Yan Qingfeng in Little Meng City. You've done a good job. Although your method is still immature and not experienced enough, the result is still satisfactory. Your technique of training soldiers is also very ingenious. I've made a copy of the technique of training soldiers in Little Meng City into a book, and I'm going to give it a try in a few new armies." Jing Ku stared at Wu Qi with a strange expression, nodded his head and said, "According to my temperament, since you've pointed out the biggest obstacle in our hearts, allowing us to make a breakthrough in our cultivation in just a few days, this merit is more than enough to reward you with 3 to 5 vassal kingdoms. But, His Majesty is different. He has much more things to consider than me. He can't tell all the ministers and princes of Great Yan Dynasty that because of a single word of advice from you, he has rewarded you with many things." Shaking his head, Jing Ku stared at Wu Qi, sneered, and said, "But, who asked you to have an intimate relationship with that little girl Zhanglu? Tuoba Qingye, Tuoba Haofeng, and those young masters and princes, although they were close to Zhanglu in the past, in essence, Zhanglu is a Wanfeng that can fly up to the 9th heaven, while these young fellows are just a bunch of maggots on the ground. Although they are self-righteous, Zhanglu will never take a liking to this group of prodigal sons. Therefore, some people don't have to worry." Looking at the hesitation and puzzlement on Wu Qi's face, Jing Ku sneered and said, "Apart from protecting you, I gave Xiongqing and his men to you because I was afraid that those men who killed Yan Buji would strike Yan Qingfeng again. If they dare to strike again, with Xiongqing and his men by your side, they would be walking right into a trap. In the end, before all our precautions could come into play, you had already turned Shire Martial Club upside down, and even managed to catch the murderer who tried to assassinate Yan Buji." Ugh. With a subtle look, Wu Qi turned to look at Jing Ku. It seemed like his words had another meaning. He grabbed a huge wild boar that measured 26 feet and 7 feet long, then threw it nearly 1,000 feet away. With an indifferent expression, Jing Ku said, "Teacher has spoiled this group of wild beasts, making them only know how to fool around in the woods. You must be wondering why I specifically asked someone to come here this time." Wu Qi sucked in a cold breath and cried out in shock, "That man is the personal guard of Wei Xiao from Wei Merchant. Could it be that the power of Wei Merchant has infiltrated into the Court of Justice and Criminal and Scouting Office? Indeed, money can make the world go round." Although Wu Qi's expression was one of extreme shock, he was laughing wildly in his mind. "Who told you that Wei Xiao is so arrogant and domineering? Today, I'll make you suffer a heavy punishment even if you don't die." Sighing lightly, Jing Ku nodded his head and said, "Teacher has a deep understanding of the human heart, and knows the ways of the world. He can easily tell whether a man's heart is good or evil. If he said that you're a good man, then you can't be any bad. If teacher said that you have an evil thought in your heart and are not a righteous man, it would be impossible for you to leave Mo Lin alive. Jing-Ke snorted lightly and continued, this is also the reason why I gave Xiong Qing and his brothers to you. He, Zhang Lu is involved in too many things, but she herself has no idea about it. But, don't tell me we don't know about it. With your background, and the fact that you don't have any powerful backer, the closer you get to Zhang Lu, the tighter the noose around your neck will be. If you don't take some precautions beforehand, you won't be able to survive for more than 3 months in Ji City. Wu Qi quickly cupped his fist and expressed his gratitude to Jing-Ke, thanking him for his concern and great kindness. At the same time, he was surprised by Jing-Ke's well-informed eyes and ears. After the incident with Shi Martial Club, he immediately rushed back to Zhuoguizhen Mansion and reported the news to Lu Qingfeng. As a result, he didn't waste much time during the journey. However, right after he had a brief conversation with Lu Qingfeng, the incident with Shi Martial Club happened. Immediately, the men sent by Jing-Ke arrived at Zhuoguizhen Mansion. The efficiency was simply amazing. Jing-Ke twitched his lips, sneered and said, what kind of crimes are you talking about? Why would I care about that? Whether you kill someone, set a fire, or even slaughter someone on the streets in Ji City, I don't care about all these trivial things. When Jing-Ke was still a wandering knight, he had done many of these things as well. I've never taken any of those crimes into my heart. All of a sudden, Jing-Ke snapped at Wu Qi with a stern voice, so, the incident with Shi Martial Club, was it your intention, or was it just a coincidence? Jing-Ke's face darkened. Rolling his eyes, he glared at Wu Qi and said, this great Yan dynasty is built by us, one tile at a time. Don't be so harsh with your words. He paused for a brief moment, then continued with a cold voice, His Majesty is stabilizing his cultivation base, and Gao Jianli and a few other men are busy with important matters, so they can't be separated from him. I know you're involved in this incident. Since you've sent some men of sacrifice to silence the witness, and you're the one who captured that man alive, there might be someone who wants to kill you. That's why I've sent someone to summon you to Mo Lin today. Firstly, it's to save your little life, and secondly, it's to let teacher know what kind of person you are. Wu Qi pondered for a brief moment. Apart from the incident with Shi Martial Club, there was nothing else that he had stirred up today. While Wu Qi was immersed in various thoughts, Jing-Ke continued speaking in a slow voice, you have to be extra careful when you go out these few days. Ask Xiong Qing and the others to follow you closely. If you meet the guard who was silenced, be careful that someone might kill you to vent their anger. Jing-Ke raised his head up and looked at the bright moon in the sky, then said with a low voice, Teacher is a scholar who possesses a bright Tao heart, and has reached the realm of deity. Unlike us, Teacher has a heart that is open and frank, like a clear mirror and glazed glass, without any worries or worries. Therefore, 1,500 years ago, he had already formed his nascent soul, and now, his cultivation base has reached the acme of perfection. Perhaps, it won't take him too many years to form his nascent soul and become a deity, truly living a long and unfettered life. After a brief moment of silence, Wu Qi shook his head and did not say anything. Wu Qi understood what Jing-Ke was trying to say. Those who occupy a high position will have different thoughts and thoughts from ordinary people. I can understand why all of you are doing this. Twitching his lips, Jing-Ke pulled out a 3 feet tall yellow wine gourd out of nowhere, opened the stopper and gulped down 2 mouthfuls of the fine wine. He breathed out a breath that reeked of wine, threw his head back, laughed and said, Prince Dan, ugh, that is His Majesty. He knew that Zhang Lu has been very close to you these days, and the closeness is very different from the closeness he had with those young masters and princes. Therefore, His Majesty found an excuse and conferred you the title of Marquis Tianyun. Wu Qi nodded his head and said, It has been over 2,000 years, and it's time for everything to rot. Hastily, Wu Qi shut his mouth. Only then did Jing-Ke continue, because he has been paying so much attention to you, that's why all these things happened. Today, I wanted to let teacher know what kind of person you are, and it was just a precautionary measure. Now that you are a good man, we can put our minds at ease. Since you are harboring evil intentions, we'll kill you as soon as possible, and that will put our minds at ease. The commotion you've caused today is a little too big. The moon hung high up in the sky, and countless fireflies were flying and dancing in the dark forest. Amidst the watery moonlight, the fireflies were dancing in the air, making the scene look like a dreamy land. A faint watery mist was shuttling back and forth in the forest. Apart from the sound of wind blowing through the dense forest, no other sound could be heard. It was different from when Wuqi came here. When he came here, those ferocious beasts and gigantic insects were blocking his way complacently, making him look bad. But when he returned to the city, those big fellows would turn and run away as fast as they could whenever they saw Jingku. Jingku breathed out a long sigh, sneered, and said, "What exactly is the identity of the man you personally captured?" He actually killed several dozens of men from criminal and justice court and scouting office on the spot to silence him. After a careful analysis, we found out that the main target they wanted to silence was the man you killed. Jingku told Wuqi everything that happened in Shire Martial Club in full detail. The main point was that all those men of sacrifice were from criminal and justice court and scouting office, and not some outsiders in disguise. When Jingku asked the question, a threat of evil force that could shake one's heart and soul burst out from his body. Wuqi felt his spirit was shaken, and he nearly told the truth. After pondering for a while, Wuqi nodded his head and said, "His Majesty's kindness, Wuqi understands." But, Wuqi doesn't understand why His Majesty would treat Wuqi in such a way. Wuqi didn't believe that he was the kind of man who was loved by everyone. Why would Yen Dan, the mighty emperor of Great Yen Dynasty, suddenly fall in love with him? Was it just because of the relationship between Princess Zhanglu? For the emperor, no matter how much a princess favored someone, there was no reason for her to send so many demon Jin Dan bears as his personal guards to Wuqi. Wuqi nodded his head. He knew what Jingku was trying to say. Is His Majesty thinking that if Wuqi were to hang out with Princess Zhanglu, and he was just a hanger-on of Duke Yenlu, it would be bad for his reputation? Therefore, he conferred the title of Marquis to Wuqi. Chapter 131. Jingku's loud shout contained a very strange ripple of energy, which vaguely carried the shadow of the mystifying technique from the Fiend Dao. While Wuqi was pondering over what Jingku had told him just now, the sudden shout from Jingku had caused his soul to tremble, and nearly told him everything he had seen and heard in Prince Ren's mansion. However, he had made some achievements in cultivating the source of Earth Chapter, Wood Chapter, and Fire Chapter. Ever since he started cultivating these three cultivation techniques, in his spiritual sea, apart from the 10,000 zhang water ripples he had obtained from cultivating the water chapter, there was also a dense earth chi, a dense forest, and a 10,000 zhang sea of flames that appeared out of nowhere. Above this earth energy, jungle, flame ocean, and water ripple was the divine flame of order, which was imprisoned by many restrictive talismans. Currently, Wuqi could not absorb the divine flame of order and make it his own, but it was, after all, one of the few divine flames in the universe. Right after Jingku's shout, which carried the shadow of the Fiend Dao, touched Wuqi's soul, the divine flame of order immediately unleashed a large sheet of green-purple light, easily dispelling Jingku's devilish voice and stabilizing Wuqi's soul. The energies of earth energy, jungle, flame ocean, and water ripple rolled and rocked violently, transforming into a four-colored whirlpool in Wuqi's spiritual ocean, firmly protecting his soul in its core. With just a slight tremble of his soul, Wuqi's mind was completely sober. However, he still put on an expression as if his soul had flown out of his body, staring blankly at Jingku. Countless thoughts flashed across his mind. Should he tell Jingku about Lao Ai or not? If he told him, perhaps he would immediately suffer the counterattack from the forces of Prince Ren's mansion. If he didn't tell him, would he just watch Lao Ai, a peerless evil man, hide in Prince Ren's mansion? Because of the relationship with Princess Yingchuan, Lao Ai had already noticed Wuqi and Lu Qingfeng. Who knew what he would do behind their backs? Compared to Lao Ai, who had a bad reputation, the reputation of Jing Ke, Gao Jianli, and Yan Dan seemed to be much better. At least, until now, they still treated Wu Qi and his companions kindly, without any malicious intent. So what if Prince Ren's residents retaliated? When Wu Qi thought of the large amount of spatial breaching spirit gold he obtained from Sure Martial Club, he was immediately filled with endless confidence. Give him some time, and he won't be afraid of anyone. As long as Wu Qi used these spatial breaching spirit gold to set up a few escape routes, he would not have to fear anyone in this world anymore. In just a blink of an eye, with a dull expression on his face, Wu Qi confessed to Jing Ke what he had seen and heard in the mansion of Prince Ren. He even took the initiative to admit to Jing Ke that he had a very high talent in the art of formations. Since Lu Qingfeng obtained the script of heaven-patching formation from heaven-breaking swordsmanship sect, he had studied it with Lu Qingfeng for a period of time, and the result was that he had learned a lot from it. That was how he bypassed the defensive formation in the Prince Ren's mansion. When he suddenly heard the two words Swanni, Jing Ke's body shuddered, and he almost leaped up from his mount. He fixed his eyes on Wu Qi and snapped, "Are you sure you heard it right? Was it really Jinjin? Did he really use that guy to carry a wheel made of pure gold and spin it around? Prince Ren, Yan Xianchen, is actually his disciple. And Princess Yingchuan has an affair with him as well. It's because you don't want to owe Princess Yingchuan a favor, that's why you attacked Sure Martial Club in advance." Wu Qi nodded his head blankly and said, "My young master's mother clan wants to divide a territory in the Lu Kingdom. If we end up owing Princess Yingchuan a favor, it will not be a good thing." After a brief pause, Wu Qi confessed to Jing Ke in a very honest manner, "I didn't know it before, but now." Wu Qi suddenly realized that if one wants to cultivate, he can't do it without money. A lower-grade magical item with the lowest quality would cost 100 gold coins, middle-grade magical item would cost several thousand gold coins, and upper-grade magical item could easily cost 100,000 gold coins. All kinds of talismans are even more expensive. Without money, how can one achieve success in cultivating? Forming my Jin Dan nascent soul, becoming a witness immortal and earth immortal, Wu Qi also wants to live a free and unfettered life. Breathing out a long sigh, Wu Qi said, without any reservation, "For the sake of cultivating, Little Meng City is my young master's private territory." Not to mention the fact that the annual production of Little Meng City is only enough for Wu Qi and my young master, only Wu Qi and my young master can satisfy our needs. However, if we want to live in Ji City, we need to keep a great number of mighty guards in our mansion, and all of that will cost us money. Therefore, we're planning to cultivate the Tai clan of Marquis Yuanyang, allowing him to establish a kingdom of his own. With the production of a kingdom as our backing, together with the production of 2 provinces owned by my young master, it will be barely enough. Breathing out a long sigh, Wu Qi shook his head and said, "The 9th clan has a large number of people, but the only useful ones are Yan Jiuhui and Yan Bugui, with only a few hundred of them. The rest are just a bunch of idiots who only know how to eat and drink." In order to keep so many members of the imperial clan, they have spent more than half of the production of 2 provinces. If we don't find another source of income, how are we going to establish a foothold in Ji City? Jing Ke gave Wu Qi a glare grumpily, reached out his hand and lightly patted on Wu Qi's chin, then cried out in a low voice, "Enough. Wake up now. Humph, how dare you, little brat. How dare you hide such an important matter from me? In order to not owe anyone a favor, you've created such a big mess." That's Lao Ai. While Jing Ke was cursing, Wu Qi suddenly woke up. With a terrified expression, he stared at Jing Ke and asked, "Chief General, what happened to me just now?" Jing Ke rolled his eyes, stared at Wu Qi, sneered, and said, "You were possessed by a ghost just now." Humph, humph. You've done a great service this time, but you don't need to know why it's a great service. Lao Ai, you fake eunuch, don't tell me you've been hiding in Great Yen for so many years. Damn you, why didn't we find you? Why didn't you argue with that godson of yours? Why are you hiding in Great Yen Dynasty? Laughing dryly, Wu Qi carefully asked, "Chief General, that Lao Ai, who exactly is he? Jing Ke's face twitched a few times. Frowning, he waved his hand forcefully and said, "You don't have to know who he is. It's a very complicated matter. If I have to explain it from 2000 years ago, it won't be clear in a short period of time. In short, you have to avoid Prince Ren's mansion for the next few days. Don't offend Prince Ren's mansion and the people around him. As for the incident of Shire Martial Club, we'll use the excuse you made up. Tell them that Yan Qingfeng has taken a fancy to Shire Martial Club and purposely tried to seize its foundation." Jing Ke sneered, shook his head and said, "This is a little unpleasant to hear. A duke is trying to seize the foundation of a martial club. Hee, but now, all the juniors are doing the same thing. It's not a big deal for your Duke Yan Li's mansion to run amok. It doesn't matter if you have a bad reputation. Among all the juniors in Great Yan Dynasty, none of them have a good reputation." Patting hard on Wu Qi's shoulder, Jing Ke said frankly, "Don't blame me for asking you with a devilish technique. Although you, a little boy, don't know about this, it is too important. Hey, Lao AI, what a great Lao AI. Even the scouting office and Gao Jianli's swallows couldn't find any clues, but you, Lao AI, have actually found some clues. You are indeed the Marquis of Chang Xian, what a great Marquis of Chang Xian, what a great Lao AI." While sighing with emotions, Jing Ke had brought Wu Qi to the outskirts of Ji City. At the moment, all 4 cities of Ji City were tightly locked, and all the city gates were tightly sealed. However, with Jing Ke's order, all the city gates were opened. From the outermost city gate all the way to the inner city, all the gates along the way were opened one after another. A great number of city guards came out to greet and guard, escorting Wu Qi all the way back to Duke Yan Li's mansion. When the procession stopped outside of Duke Yan Li's mansion, they happened to see 2 small green coaches parked in a small alley opposite the entrance of the mansion. Jing Ke had a pair of sharp eyes, and he saw the 2 coaches. He casually flicked his whip at Wu Qi and murmured under his breath, "Report to me tomorrow. Who would pay a visit to Duke Yan Li's mansion in the middle of the night? Remember my words, be more cautious when you travel these days, and be more cautious when you speak. Don't mention anything about Lao AI to anyone, and no matter what rumors you hear, just pretend you didn't hear anything." Escorted by Jing Ke, the group of city guards walked towards the general's mansion in the inner city. Wu Qi watched the procession disappear after turning a corner, and only then did he hastily walk into Duke Yan Li's mansion. He walked along the tunnel and came to the parlor, which was used by Lu Qingfeng only when he received the honorable guests. He saw Yan Fu, Lao He, and a few others were waiting on the outside with a solemn expression, while serving servants were carrying plates of fruits, tea, and snacks into the parlor. Upon seeing Wu Qi come in, Lao He quickly came up to him with an excited expression. He lowered his voice, and with an unconcealable excitement, he laughed and said, "Mr. Wu Qi, you're finally back. Go in and have a look, an honorable guest has arrived. The benefactor of young master is here. He has just arrived for a while, and young master has just invited him in. This old mister is young master's great benefactor. Mr. Wu Qi, you have to treat him with great care." Lu Qingfeng's great benefactor. Wu Qi was struck dumb. Since when did Lu Qingfeng have any great benefactor? This guy grew up in the Lu family of Liang, and when he reached the age where he should take over part of the family business, and when he was strong enough to pose a threat to the real disciples of the Lu family, Lu Tsuhai, he was kicked away to Little Meng City and left to fend for himself. Who was the benefactor to him? In those years, Lu Qingfeng was just an illegitimate son who was not welcomed by the Lu family. Flicking away the dust from his clothes, Wu Qi put on a smile and strode into the parlor. The parlor was brightly lit, and the supreme-grade wax made from the oil of merman shone brightly. A fragrant aroma came wafting into Wu Qi's face, making his clothes wet by the dew from Mo Lin feel very comfortable. Inside the parlor, Lu Qingfeng was serving tea to an old man with a smile on his face. The old man was sitting on the seat of honor, receiving the tea served by Lu Qingfeng with a big smile on his face. At the same time, he kept saying that he didn't dare, grabbed Lu Qingfeng's arm and asked him to sit down. This old man was wearing a long robe made of green silk. His skin was whiter than snow, and his face was as white as silver. His round face looked rich and generous, and the 3 strands of silver beard under his chin exuded a sense of vigor and elegance. This old man didn't wear many ornaments. He only had 2 dragon-shaped jade pendants hanging on his left and right side, and a silver ring on the middle finger of his left hand. On the surface of the ring were 2 masks of the same size, and 2 big twisted mouths were smiling brightly. He was from the Wei family. Obviously, the mask was the emblem of Wei merchant. Wu Qi gave the old man a deep look, cupped his fist and bowed at Lu Qingfeng. "Young master, Wu Qi is back." Lu Qingfeng was delighted. Without hesitation, he turned to Wu Qi and said, "You're back. Quick, come and greet old Mr. Wei. He is the current clan leader of Wei merchant, and the grandfather of young Miss Wei Xiaoxiao. The reason why he came here today is to give an explanation to Shi Martial Club. I never expected that old Mr. Wei is the benefactor who gave Qingfeng the mystic technique of cultivation and a large sum of money." Wu Qi was struck dumb. Before Lu Qingfeng went to Little Meng City, he had been studying the Tao of formation. With his cultivation of peak stage Hotian realm, he was able to control a formation constructed by 3 formation pillars. This proved that he had an extraordinary cultivation in the Tao of formation. At that time, Wu Qi found it strange. Perhaps the cultivation technique he was using was a secret technique of Lu family, but the Tao of formation was a technique that only cultivators would know. As a bastard son of Lu family, where did he get it from? Especially the lower-tier magical treasure used by Lu Qingfeng, the little 25th lamp. It was not until after he left Ji City that Wu Qi found out the market price of lower-tier magical treasures from the market of 4 seas. The price of upper-tier magical treasures in the market was over 100,000 gold coins, and the price of lower-tier magical treasures was even more immeasurable. After all, even Nia Yaonu and Nia Baihong from Heaven-Breaking Sword sect, who were both human immortals of Jin Dan, had only used lower-tier magical treasures. Wu Qi had long felt that the origin of the little 25th lamp used by Lu Qingfeng was a little strange, and it made him realize that he had such a great benefactor in the past. The so-called large sum of money, how much did this old man of Wei merchant give Lu Qingfeng in those years? With all kinds of thoughts flashing in his mind, Wu Qi took a slow step forward and greeted this old man meticulously. Chapter 132. The old man from Wei clan gave Wu Qi a glance smilingly, then used his right hand to touch his left wrist and took off a bracelet, which was 6 fingers wide and had a purple-blue hue, with a color as deep as a bottomless abyss. He handed the bracelet over to Wu Qi, smiled and said, "You are also a young hero. I heard that little friend Wu Qi has joined Heaven-Breaking Sword sect. Since you are a cultivator, this storage bracelet is more useful in the hands of little friend Wu Qi than in mine." Wu Qi stared at the bracelet that was placed 3 feet in front of him. The bracelet was glinting brilliantly, and countless starlight could be seen swirling on its deep surface. Clouds and wind could be seen flying at top speed. In the depths of the bracelet, there were some indistinct red blood threads that formed a series of magical runes. Wu Qi could recognize these runes. They were all mentioned in Scroll of Stealing, the Sumeru Mustard immortal talismans that could only be found in upper-grade magical storage items. Looking at the smiling expression on the old man's face, Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and said, "Wu Qi dares not accept this gift." "I dare not accept it." The old man stared at Wu Qi with surprise. He shook his head and said, "Little friend Wu Qi, haven't you heard of the saying that one dares not reject a gift from an elder? When I first saw you, little friend Wu Qi, I found you to be a man I like. Therefore, I'm just giving you a small gift as a meeting gift. What is there to be ashamed of? Wei clan has been operating in Great Yan Dynasty for a long time, and this is just a storage magical item. It's nothing to me." Lu Qingfeng looked at Wu Qi, smiled and said, "Wu Qi, since it is old Mr. Wei's kind intention, just accept it. Old Mr. Wei has done me a great favor, and he is truly my benefactor, as well as our elder. This is just a storage magical item. Just accept it." Wu Qi shook his head, bowed respectfully to the old man, and slowly took 3 steps back. He stared at the old man and said in an indifferent tone, "The reason why Wu Qi refuses to accept old Mr's gift is not only because I feel ashamed of it, but also because I don't want to owe old Mr. a favor. For someone like you, it is too difficult to return a favor." Lu Qingfeng's expression changed slightly, while the old man straightened his back and looked at Wu Qi with an interested expression. "Why do you say that?" Wu Qi gave the old man a deep look, smiled and said, "May I ask old Mr., what is the purpose of your visit? Is it just to reminisce with our young master? If old Mr. wants to reminisce about the old days, as our young master has been staying in Ji City for quite some time, you should have come to visit him earlier, don't you think so?" Lu Qingfeng sat down slowly on the seat, looking at the old man with a smile on his face. The old man sighed lightly. He weighed the storage bracelet in his hand, shook his head and said, "What a cunning lad. I've been a merchant all my life, and this is the first time in my life that I failed to deliver a treasure to someone. TSK, you're giving a treasure to someone, but you're actually not willing to accept it. You brat, you brat." The old man looked at Wu Qi with a slightly disappointed expression, breathed out a long sigh and said, "Fortunately, there are very few people like you in the world. Otherwise, my way merchant." Ha ha ha. He gave 3 loud laughs, then casually threw the bangle out of the parlor. A loud splashing noise was heard, as the bangle was thrown into some stream or river outside the parlor. The old man laughed and said, "Forget it. Since you don't like my gift, this bracelet is useless. I can only throw it away. I can only throw it away." Lu Qingfeng cupped his fist, bowed slightly to the old man and said, "Wu Qi's words were inappropriate. I hope old Mr. won't take offense." The old man shook his head and said, "No, no, how could I blame him? Speaking of which, little friend Wu Qi has hit the nail on the head. Indeed, I'm not here to talk about the old days with Duke Yenlu." The old man put on a solemn expression and said with a deep voice, "I'm a merchant, and the duty of a merchant is to hoard and seek great profits. Many years ago, Duke Yenlu was bullied and humiliated by a few brothers from Lu clan of Liang, and he suffered a fate worse than death. I was fortunate enough to witness it, and thus, I gave Duke Yenlu the beginner cultivation technique, the secret of formation, and 1,000,000 gold ingots." Wu Qi sucked in a cold breath. This old man was really generous. How could he spend so much money on a poor illegitimate son like Lu Qingfeng? The Qi refinement mantra and array formation mysteries were priceless secret manuals, but to be honest, the value of these secret manuals was only the cost of the manual labor and the cost of paper and ink. But, 1,000,000 gold ingots, 1,000,000 gold ingots. To spend so much money on an illegitimate son, this old man was not only bold, he was simply insane. Could it be that he already knew the secret that Lu Qingfeng was the illegitimate son of Yan Buji at that time? Or, could it be that he already knew Lu Qingfeng's future achievement at that time? 1,000,000 gold ingots. Without even asking, the origin of that lower-tier magical treasure of Lu Qingfeng, the little lamp of third, could be easily found out. What couldn't one buy with money? No wonder Lu Qingfeng was so poor when he went to Little Meng City. He had simply used all his wealth to buy a lower-tier magical treasure. Once again, Lu Qingfeng cupped his fist and bowed to the old man. He sat up straight, bowed slightly and said, "Old Mr's kindness is like giving Qingfeng a new life. Qingfeng will never forget it for the rest of his life." Straightening his body, Lu Qingfeng stared at the old man and said with a deep voice, "No matter what request old Mr. has, as long as Qingfeng can do it, I'll do it without any hesitation. Old Mr., what do you want from me? Just tell me." This guy had sold him out with just a few words. Wu Qi frowned and gave Lu Qingfeng a look, then breathed out a sigh. It was a good thing, as this was the weakness of Lu Qingfeng's character. But, at least it was better than those guys who would turn their backs on him. In the future, Wu Qi would devote himself to the path of cultivation. He would need endless money, energy stones, and pills to support his cultivation, and Lu Qingfeng would be his biggest source of income. An affectionate and loyal brother is always better than a heartless and ungrateful partner. Wu Qi breathed out another sigh, then he walked to a table next to Lu Qingfeng and sat down. A few serving ladies walked over quietly and served him tea, fruits, and snacks. Wu Qi picked up the teacup and sniffed the aroma of the tea with an indifferent expression. After that, he took a sip of the tea and put down the teacup, then turned to look at the old man. Quietly, he stared at the old man. He felt that a light was about to burst out from his mind, yet he couldn't grasp it no matter how hard he tried. This was a feeling that came from the strong intuition left to him by Lu Xiaobai, and it had nothing to do with Wu Qi himself. Instinct told Wu Qi that he should be able to guess the identity of this old man. But, no matter how hard he racked his brain, he just couldn't figure out who this old man was. The old man looked at Lu Qingfeng with a satisfied expression. He lightly knocked on the table and said, "Let me put it this way. Many years ago, when I helped Duke Yanlu, it was an investment. An investment needs a return. Now, I need the exclusive management rights of all metal and energy stone mines in Duke Yanli's territory. I'll give you the income that Duke Yanlu should have, but all the mines must be monopolized by Wei Merchant." Before Lu Qingfeng could say anything, Wu Qi had already said with an anxious voice, "We can give you the metal mines, but not the energy stone mines. Our young master and Wu Qi have both joined Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect, and these energy stone mines are now under the sole management of Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect." After a brief moment of pondering, the old man turned to look at Lu Qingfeng. Lu Qingfeng nodded his head and said with a deep voice, "That's right. Currently, all the energy stone mines in Qingfeng's territory are under the management of Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect, and all the energy stones will belong to Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect, for their disciples to use in their cultivation." The old man sighed, shook his head and said, "I'm a little late. Competing with Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect? I'm not that crazy." "Well, forget about the energy stone mines, but those metal mines will be under the sole management of Wei Merchant. What do you think, Duke Yanlu? Consider it as a return of my favor, Duke Yanlu." Wu Qi praised in his mind. This old man Wei was indeed a great merchant with many years of experience. Just a moment ago, he was still talking about the favor, but now, he had immediately laid out his price and discussed the deal. Even ghosts knew that if Wei Merchant monopolized all the metal mines in Lu Qingfeng's territory, the profits he could get would be tremendous. This old man's appetite was much bigger than Wei Xiaoxiao's. Wei Xiaoxiao only wanted a few iron mines in Lu Qingfeng's territory, but this old man wanted to swallow all the metal mines in Lu Qingfeng's territory. Staring at the silver-haired and silver-bearded old man, Lu Qingfeng clenched his jaws, nodded his head and said, "Old mister, Qingfeng is indebted to you. Whatever you want, Qingfeng will agree to. However, there are many mines in Qingfeng's territory, and they are related to the expenditure of several thousand members of the 9th clan of Yan clan." The old man stroked his beard, smiled and said, "Of course. How much is the annual output of all the mines in Duke Yanli's territory?" "I'll pay Duke Yanlu an extra 30% of the profit, based on the average output of the past 10 years. The old man let out 3 loud laughs, then turned to look at Lu Qingfeng and said, "Now that we've finished talking about the serious matters, I have a small request. Wei Xiaoxiao is my good-for-nothing granddaughter. When I first asked her to take charge of all the affairs of the merchant in Ji City, she had already made a big mistake." The old man sighed lightly, then looked at Lu Qingfeng and said slowly, "I hope Duke Yanlu can forgive Xiaoxiao if she has offended you in any way. Also, the man who was captured in Shire Martial Club is just a guard hired by Xiaoxiao. He has nothing to do with the death of Duke Yanlu, Duke Buji." Lu Qingfeng frowned and didn't say anything. He turned to look at Wu Qi, and vaguely, a trace of uneasiness and hesitation could be seen in his eyes. Wu Qi stared at the old man and asked with a deep voice, "The one who killed Xiaoxiao is someone from Wei clan?" The old man answered with a deep voice, "Yes. It was this old man who personally gave the order to kill that guard and destroy his face. If the people of Scouting Office and Swallow were to know that Xiaoxiao's guard appeared in Shire Martial Club and colluded with Shi Tianma to assassinate Duke Buji, our Wei clan would never be able to clear our name." In order to avoid all these troubles, I had no choice but to kill him. I'll get rid of all the suspicion, and only after that will I come here to ask for a favor from Duke Yenlu. Lu Qingfeng pondered for a brief moment, then turned to look at Wu Qi. Sighing lightly, Wu Qi raised his right palm up into the air and said, I swear on the lives and souls of Wu Qi's fellow apprentices, Wu Qi will never reveal anything that happened in Shi Martial Club to anyone. Everything is just a coincidence. As for the guard, it was because he was trying to flee, and Wu Qi wanted to capture him alive to show his might. In short, it is impossible for Miss Wei Xiaoxiao to have any relationship with Shi Martial Club. The old man stared at Wu Qi with surprise and said, This is a strange oath. Little friend Wu Qi's sect. Wu Qi sighed and said, Since young, Wu Qi was brought up by my master. To Wu Qi, my master is like a father or a mother. If Wu Qi does not abide by the oath today, I'll make my master, Wu Qi's master, and all my fellow apprentices have their souls dispersed, never to be reincarnated again. 2 drops of tears gently rolled down from Wu Qi's cheeks. Wu Wang and Lu Xiaobai had their souls dispersed, never to be reincarnated again. Hearing such a vicious oath, the old man felt relieved immediately. A sorrowful expression was seen on his face, as he slowly comforted Wu Qi. After a few drops of tears, Wu Qi wiped them dry, smiled and asked the old man, Not only that, what is old mister's name? The old man laughed and said, I'm Wei Sanju, and I call myself Old Man Yangdi. Little friend, you can just call this old man Wei Yangdi. Suddenly, Wei Sanju, Yangdi So, and Wu Qi threw their gazes over at the ring on the old man's finger. Suddenly, a thought exploded in his mind. He could roughly guess the identity of this old man. When Lu Qingfeng was still a young man, he had the courage to invest millions of gold coins. Apart from him, who else could it be? Chapter 133. Because of the presence of Wu Qi, the atmosphere in the parlor had become rather strange. Although Wei Sanju was a shrewd old man with a thick face, he was not used to this awkward atmosphere. After chatting with Lu Qingfeng for a short while, he rose and bid his farewell. Lu Qingfeng dared not to show any neglect. Without hesitation, he summoned Yan Fu, Lao He, and all his family members, lining up and sending him off from Duke Yan Li's mansion. From a small alley on the opposite side of the street, 2 coaches drove out at top speed. Wei Sanju, with a face full of smiles, boarded the coach, poked his head out from the window, and waved his hand at Lu Qingfeng in a friendly manner. He said loudly, Duke Yan Lu, please don't send me off too far. If that's the case, I'll send someone to take over after a few days. I hope Duke Yan Lu can inform me in advance. Lu Qingfeng bowed deeply, his palms nearly touching the ground. He said passionately, since old mister has given his order, Qingfeng will obey it. Rest assured, old mister, there will be no mistake in this matter. 2 lanterns hanging on the shaft of both coaches were lit up. The unique badge of Wei merchant with a laughing face looked very eye-catching in the dim light of the night. The coaches left slowly, and a team of patrolling soldiers happened to pass by. When they saw the 2 coaches, they didn't show any reaction and just let them pass by. Curfew had been enforced in Ji City, and obviously, Wei Sanju's coaches had violated the curfew. However, the badge of Wei merchant had a unique effect, as it could make these soldiers give them a way out. Money makes the world go round. Looking at this, Wu Qi couldn't help but shake his head. Since both the criminal and justice court and scouting office had their own spies from Wei merchant, why couldn't the city guards have their own? Perhaps, all the soldiers in the city guards of Ji City had been fed by Wei merchant. Lu Qingfeng looked at the coach that Wei Sanju had left, took a deep breath and said, he is, after all, my great benefactor. Although there might be some suspicion of demanding a favor, a drop of water should be repaid with a spring of water. I'm not a gentleman, but I can't be an ungrateful villain. Wu Qi, this matter ends here. Glancing at Lu Qingfeng, Wu Qi nodded helplessly. Should I just let this matter go? Ha, Lu Qingfeng makes it sound easy. With this old man's background and the fact that he had spent a lot of money to nurture this rare commodity, it wouldn't be so easy for you to end your relationship with him just like that. His surname was Wei, and he used those smiling faces as the insignia of the merchant guild. When the two mouths were placed side by side, not only could they be placed side by side, but they could also be superimposed downwards. That was the character Lu. Yangdi So, what a Yangdi South. A businessman who was born in Yangdi, had the surname Lu, and liked to invest heavily in advance. Who else could it be other than Lu Buwei, who had almost single-handedly established the foundation of the Daqin dynasty? Lao Ai had been hiding in Great Yan dynasty for over 2,000 years. Why couldn't he, Lu Buwei, change his appearance and build his own business in Great Yan dynasty? Judging from what happened in Shire Martial Club, the foundation of Lu Buwei in Great Yan dynasty was not necessarily weaker than Lao Ai's. After staring blankly at Lu Buwei's coach that was disappearing into the distance for a while, Wu Qi spun and returned to Duke Yan Li's mansion. He cried out loudly, Xiao Bai, ask a few brothers to help me go to the parlor and fish out the bracelet that old man Wei threw out. TSK, he was the one who threw away the bracelet, not me, Wu Qi, who accepted his gift. At most, I can be considered as retrieving the trash. I don't owe him a favor. Quick, fish it out now. Listening to Wu Qi's shameless words, Lu Qingfeng and the others had their faces turned black and white. However, Wu Qi didn't care what they were thinking. He asked Meng Xiaobai to bring some men to the few streams and rivers outside the parlor to fish out the bracelet, while he told them that he was going to do some homework for the night, circulating his energy and regulating his breath. After that, he hastily returned to his abode, shut the door tightly, and with a twist of his body, he was shrouded by a thread of earth energy and plunged into the ground. In just a blink of an eye, he had gone a few miles away. Carefully following the direction where Lu Buwei had gone, Wu Qi used the earth element to move for a few miles. Noiselessly, he came to the bottom of Lu Buwei's coach. The speed of the coach was not fast, about the same as an ordinary man walking. Wu Qi came out from the ground with ease, and without making any noise, he stuck himself to the bottom of the coach. Apart from the sound of the wheels rubbing against the ground, the only thing Wu Qi could hear was the footsteps of the soldiers of the city defense army who kept passing by from a distance. The two coaches belonging to Lu Buwei looked ordinary, as they were pieced together with wooden planks and painted with a layer of varnish. However, when Wu Qi touched them with his palm, he immediately recognized that they were made of a rare acquired spirit item, the sound-canceling wood of innumerable valleys. Not only was this acquired spirit wood flexible and strong, it could even withstand the attacks from magical items that were lower than mid-tier magical treasures, and it was an expert in isolating sound and divine sense. No one below the realm of heaven immortal could use their divine sense to penetrate the barrier of the sound-canceling wood of innumerable valleys, and there was no way they could eavesdrop on the voices of the people inside. Twitching his lips, Wu Qi shook his head. He felt lucky that he had found an innate spirit item with wood element beforehand, and was able to cultivate the source of wood chapter. A thread of innate wood element energy, which brought with it a vigorous life force, came out from his palm and quietly fused into the coach made from the sound-canceling wood of innumerable valleys. In an instant, it transformed into a large net and enveloped the entire coach. It was as if the sound-isolating tree of myriad valleys was cheering and welcoming Wu Qi's innate energy. Wherever Wu Qi's innate energy passed through, the tree would adjust its internal structure cooperatively. The coach, which could isolate all sound and divine sense, immediately turned into a funnel. Immediately, Wu Qi could clearly hear the conversation between Lu Buwei and another young man in the coach, and his divine sense had also sensed the existence of both men. Lu Buwei breathed out a heavy sigh, shook his head and said, "In Great Yan, Xiao Xiao is still too young and inexperienced, and he can't take charge on his own. Long Feng, in the future, you will have to help Xiao Xiao in his work." It was supposed to be a simple matter, but he had to make it so tense, and even drew out Nye Baihong from Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect. This is not worth it. When doing business, harmony brings wealth. Why is there a need to fight and kill? Sighing lightly, Lu Buwei continued in an indifferent tone, at least, before we can mine enough spatial breaching spirit gold and build the universal teleportation formations that can be found everywhere under the heaven, it is not a good idea to start a war. Only a few of you juniors are capable, and you will have to stay in different dynasties. Patriarch is made of iron, how many nails can he hit? The coach fell into a moment of silence, then the young man, Wei Longfeng, said with a deep voice, "Rest assured, Patriarch. I will do my best to help Xiao Xiao, and I will try my best to prevent her from doing anything too outrageous. But, Xiao Xiao is Patriarch's granddaughter. How can I restrain her?" Lu Buwei threw out a pale golden medallion and said coolly, "Take this medallion. When she goes too far, take it out to deter her." Humph. Nia Baihong has forced her to swear an oath on her prime divine soul, forbidding her from tangling with Duke Yan Li's mansion. In order to avoid the oath, she actually used the soul replacement puppet, which is the only 13 of us in our clan, to erase her oath. She is simply fooling around. Wei Longfeng remained silent, while Lu Buwei sighed and said, "Soul replacement puppet is a precious treasure, and yet, she actually used it in a dispute because of her personal feelings. Although there is an iron mine in Duke Yan Li's fief that has produced a rare treasure, the spatial breaching spirit gold, it is not worth it to use that soul replacement puppet. I, Patriarch, can solve the problem with just a few words. So, why did she have to make such a fuss?" After a moment of silence, Lu Buwei said with a serious tone, "Yan Dan, Jing Ku, and a few others from Great Yan Dynasty are easy to deal with, but Wei Wuji, Tian Wen, Zhao Sheng, Huang Xia, and a few others are people who will devour us without spitting out the bones. If Patriarch is not roaming around, our clan would have long been devoured by them." With a solemn expression, Wei Longfeng stared at Lu Buwei and kept nodding his head. Lu Buwei breathed out a long sigh, shook his head and said, "Patriarch can travel millions of miles with the great transporting technique of 5 ghosts, but this mystic technique can only be used once every 6 months. The reason why I came to Great Yen this time is for that spatial breaching spirit gold. I'm afraid the next time I come here will be a few years later. It seems like Great Wei and Great Zhao have discovered each other's existence, and they are now preparing for a great war. In the next few years, Patriarch will be guarding that place, and I'll take care of things amidst the chaos. So, Longfeng, you have to be cautious in the affairs of Great Yan Dynasty." With utmost reverence, Wei Longfeng knelt in the coach and gave Lu Buwei 2 kowtows. Lu Buwei nodded his head, sighed and said, "It's a pity that you're not from the lineage clan. The rules of the clan are set by me, Patriarch, and I can't break them easily. Compared to Xiao Xiao and the others, you are much smarter and capable. Make some contributions, so that I can make an exception and promote you into the lineage clan during the clan assembly." Wei Longfeng's expression changed, and he gave Lu Buwei a few more kowtows. Lu Buwei smiled, stroked his beard, and accepted the kowtows. He blinked his eyes, pondered quickly for a while, then gave another order, "Put all the spies in Great Yan Dynasty into use, and monitor the movements of Yingzheng and Baiqi." Since they entered a secluded cultivation in Daqin 30 years ago, Patriarch could no longer sense their aura in Daqin. "I have no idea where they have gone to. Perhaps, they will come here. No one can say for sure." Once again, Wei Longfeng answered respectfully. Only then did Lu Buwei nod his head, breathed out a long sigh, and carefully advised Wei Longfeng for a while. Suddenly, 5 beams of 5 colors, red, white, green, blue, and black, burst out from his body. 5 little ghosts, who stood only 1 foot and 2 inches tall, leaped out from the 5 beams, each holding a lotus throne glinting with a golden gleam in their hands. Then, they lifted Lu Buwei up. The 5 beams of 5 colors rotated and suddenly tore open a pitch-black hole in the air in the coach. Drenched in sweat, the 5 little ghosts leaped into the hole, and in just a blink of an eye, they brought Lu Buwei and disappeared without a trace. Wu Qi narrowed his eyes, as he recognized the origin of this cultivation technique. It was the transporting technique of 5 ghosts, which he found in the Scroll of Stealing. When cultivated to a higher level, one could transform into the body of a heavenly ghost, allowing one to travel freely in the void without any hindrance. Obviously, Lu Buwei had not cultivated to the highest level, as he still had to rely on the help of the 5 heavenly ghosts he had raised to travel through the void with his fleshly body. Judging from what he said, this old fellow had actually established a base outside of Great Yen Dynasty. Obviously, the contribution of the transporting technique of 5 ghosts could not go unnoticed. While most of the cultivators of Great Yen Dynasty were still confined to the territory of Great Yen Dynasty, Lu Buwei had already begun to travel around the world. Fortunately, his cultivation base was not profound, and he could only travel a super long distance once every half a year. Lu Buwei, a formidable enemy. Suddenly, Wu Qi had a feeling. This old fellow had cast a net that had completely covered the entire Great Yen Dynasty. Perhaps, the death of Yen Buji must have something to do with Wei Merchant. What Lu Buwei wanted was not those few iron ores, but the spatial breaching spirit gold that had mutated underneath 2 iron ores. This could explain where the spatial breaching spirit gold found in the secret chamber of Shi Martial Club came from. Presumably, it was a secret stash that Shi Tianma had secretly collected when he was helping Wei Xiaoxiao. After a brief moment of pondering, Wu Qi quietly pulled out the sword of Greedy Wolf, thrusting it through the bottom of the coach and piercing deep into Wei Longfeng's body. It went straight through his dantian and sliced his Jin Dan into pieces. Not even in his wildest dream did Wei Longfeng expect that he would be attacked here. Before he could react, his Jin Dan was shattered by Wu Qi's sword, and his blood essence and aura began to rush into Wu Qi's body like a raging river. As he was cultivating with a fire element cultivation technique, he was a human immortal of early-stage Jin Dan realm. As the raging fire element energy kept rushing into Wu Qi's fire meridians, in just the time it took to finish a pot of tea, all his spirit, energy and soul were completely absorbed by Wu Qi. Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi's eyes shone with a faint flame as he plunged back into the ground. After that, he casually threw out a thread of divine flame of order and smashed it onto the coach. The purple-green flame spread and quickly enveloped the entire coach. In just a blink of an eye, the coach was burned into ashes. Chapter 134. Early in the morning, Wu Qi, whose cultivation of the Source of Fire chapter had advanced to the embryonic breath tier of Xiantian realm, left his room feeling refreshed. The bracelet which Lu Buwei had abandoned was now lying quietly in his left sleeve. After all, he had rejected the gift given to him last night. Although Lu Buwei had abandoned it, and Wu Qi took it out with the thought of recycling it, it did not look good. Therefore, he did not wear it on his wrist openly, but hid it in his sleeve. After all, it was a gift given by Lu Buwei, the treacherous hero of this generation. There were 7 layers of storage space in the bracelet, and each of them was twice as big as the storage ring given to Wu Qi by Princess Xianglu. In each of the 7 layers of storage space, there was a flying sword of upper-tier magical item level, which contains 7 different energies: gold, wood, water, fire, earth, ice, and thunder. For the cultivators of heaven-breaking sword sect, no matter which sword technique they were cultivating, they could always use a flying sword with 7 different energies. Apart from the 7 flying swords, there were also a gold mountain, a silver mountain, a copper mountain, an iron mountain, an emerald mountain, a white jade mountain, and a crystal mountain inside the bracelet. The value of gold and silver was over 10 million taels of silver, and the weight of copper and iron was at least 4 to 5 million kilograms. There were emerald, white jade, crystal, and many other precious stones, and the amount of each pile was over 100,000. It was indeed a great merchant that had branches in all the kingdoms. With such a generous gift, it was more than enough to befriend Wu Qi, a mere marquis of Tianyun of Great Yen Dynasty, who did not have any background. If Lu Buwei had not met Wu Qi, the freak, with such a generous gift, he would definitely be able to win over a man who might be useful to him in the future. Too bad, I'm not Lu Qingfeng and the others. After killing the elite members of the old man's clan, I can burn the corpses and erase all the evidence, and then I can use the huge wealth given by the old man to buy some stuff in the market. Why does it feel so good? Riding on the back of the single-horned deer, Wuqi shook his head and hummed a little tune as he arrived at the market of Four Seas alone. After asking a few brokers who were loitering at the entrance of the market, Wuqi found Fairski, who had helped him buy the mermaid oil last time. Fairski, who was running towards the entrance of the market, saw Wuqi from afar, and his face was full of smiles. From afar, he hurriedly shouted, "Marquis, you came to the market of Four Seas to choose treasures again? Please forgive me for not going out to welcome you, Marquis." Wuqi cast a glance at Fairski with a smile. Then, he jumped down from his mount and threw a long list to Fairski. "Cut the crap. You'll get your share." Looking at the items on this list, he should be able to gather them in the market of the Four Seas. It was just that the quantity was a little more, but it wasn't rare. "Help me prepare well. We must collect everything by today." Fairski hurriedly took over the list and quickly glanced at the dozens of materials written down by Wuqi. They were all kinds of materials, such as 100-tempered iron essence, 100-year dark iron, 1000-year cold iron, 1000-year lava iron essence, and so on. All of them were made of various kinds of metals. Each of them weighed at least several million kilograms. Although the quantity was huge, it was not rare at all. Wuqi proudly patted his left sleeve like a nouveau riche. He laughed out loud and said, "Prepare as soon as possible. We must deliver the goods by today. Don't save money for me. Ha ha ha, I nearly forgot that I'm also a nobleman. I've made a fortune in the past couple of days. You only need to send these goods to me. Apart from the quantity listed on the list, it'll be best if you have more." Fairski smiled so widely that his eyes had narrowed into two lines. He hurriedly led Wuqi into the market of Four Seas and sat down in the same tea-house as last time. After that, he hastily ran out of the tea-house to help Wuqi prepare the goods. He ran so fast that his feet almost touched the back of his head. The merchants in the market of Four Seas loved to do business like Wuqi's the most. Materials such as 100-tempered iron essence and 100-year dark iron were precious, but not rare. If the quantity was large enough, the profit would be astonishingly high. Last time, the materials such as mermaid oil that Wuqi bought were extremely expensive and rare. Although they were all extremely expensive, because of the small quantity, the profit was not as good as selling a large quantity of these materials that were not so rare. This time, Wuqi had listed out the quantity of 100-tempered iron essence and other materials that he wanted to buy, and he had even said that the more, the better. Therefore, this business was definitely going to be successful. Throwing the storage bracelet on the table, Wuqi sat by the table, sipping his fragrant tea in a leisurely manner while looking at the merchants and customers coming and going on the street through the window. Occasionally, some merchants would send some rare and exotic goods. Putting aside those non-living objects, those rare birds and beasts were an eye-opener for Wuqi. This world was extremely rich in species, and strange things were emerging in an endless stream. The tea lasted for the whole morning, and then half of the afternoon had passed. When the sun was about to set in the west, Fairski, who was covered in sweat, finally rushed back. Behind him were a dozen other merchants, who were also sweating profusely. They walked into the tea-house silently with a big smile on their faces, then placed the storage rings on their fingers in front of Wuqi. After scanning through these storage rings with his divine sense, Wuqi nodded satisfactorily. The quantity of various goods had far exceeded Wuqi's demand, nearly 10 times more than what he needed. He transferred all the goods from these storage rings into this storage bracelet with a huge capacity, then asked Fairski for the total price, and paid for all the goods with real gold and silver without bargaining. Weighing the bracelet in his hand, Wuqi smiled indifferently and said, "It seems the quantity of 100-tempered iron essence and a few other materials is a little less?" Fairski's face, which looked like a blooming chrysanthemum, suddenly turned gloomy. Frowning, he looked at Wuqi, breathed out a long sigh and said, "Materials like 100-tempered iron essence and other materials are controlled by Great Yen Dynasty, used to smelt all kinds of armors and weapons. More than half of this business is controlled by Wei Merchant, and we can't find too many of them in the market of Four Seas. But when dealing with Wei merchant, Miss Wei Xiao, it's really not easy to talk to her now. Great Yan dynasty had implemented a special control on materials like 100-tempered iron essence, but those materials like 1,000-years-old lava iron that ordinary people couldn't use, and could only be used by cultivators, were not restricted. Therefore, the quantity of 100-tempered iron essence put together by these dozens of merchants was only slightly more than 50,000 kilograms more than what Wu Qi requested. Unlike those other cultivation materials, the quantity of each of them had skyrocketed. Wu Qi nodded his head, smiled and said, "I understand. You've done a good job. In the future, if I need anything, I'll still look for you." He paused for a brief moment, then Wu Qi pulled out an identity token and threw it over to Fersky, saying, "Help me keep an eye on this place. In the future, if there are any good materials that can be used by cultivators in the market of 4 seas, or something that belongs to 5 elements, or something that you can't identify, just go straight to Duke Yan Li's mansion and look for me." Fersky's face blushed with excitement. He hastily took over the identity token, and couldn't even say a word. With this identity token, he could be considered as the personal manager of Marquis Tianyun, and his status in the market of 4 seas would definitely rise to a higher level. Not only Marquis Tianyun, he had also formed a relationship with Duke Yan Li's mansion. In the future, his meteoric rise was just around the corner. Bringing with him a bracelet filled with various metal materials, Wu Qi quickly left the market of 4 seas, riding his mount and heading towards Mount White Sunday. Stroking the storage bracelet, which had a smooth surface and felt cold to the touch, Wu Qi's heart was filled with endless joy. With these metal materials, he could use the mystic technique of scroll of stealing to refine the minor universal alloy. This alloy was the crystallization of several dozens of rare metal materials, and was a material used in crafting upper-grade magical treasures. Of course, the main use of this material was to craft the minor universal teleportation formation, which was the base of short-distance teleportation formations. Together with the spatial breaching spirit gold he obtained last time, and the huge amount of energy stones given to him by Princess Xianglu, he could easily craft several hundred of these formation discs, constructing a dense network of teleportation formations that belonged solely to him. With these teleportation formations, he could attack and defend whenever he wanted. As long as he could set up some secret caves and hiding places, he would have the confidence to protect himself in this world. No matter if it was Lao Ai, Lu Buwei, the 4 princes of the Warring States period, the first emperor Ing Zheng, or the murderer Wang Baiqi, as long as he had the minor universal teleportation formation, Wu Qi could ignore all of them. Although this teleportation formation was only a teleportation formation within a planet, and the furthest distance of teleportation was 10 million miles, for Wu Qi, it was more than enough. With 10 million kilometers of space to move strategically, who could do anything to him? Throwing his head back and laughing out loud, Wu Qi spurred his mount and sped out of Ji City, rushing towards Mount White Sun at the fastest speed. When he was leaving the city, he could clearly sense a few hostile gazes staring at his back. He had a rough idea of who these people were. What he had done during the past few days had turned the already muddy pond of Ji City into a muddy pit. He had no idea how many people were thinking about him. Among them, the ones who were thinking about him the most were none other than a few people. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi injected the innate wood energy into the single-horned deer's body. The wood energy transformed into wind, and as Wu Qi recited an incantation, a large sheet of green wind suddenly burst out from under the hooves of the deer. Along with a swishing sound, the single-horned elk took less than 1/3 of the usual time to reach Mount White Sunday. Looking back at the pitch-dark Ji City on the horizon, a strange smile emerged on Wu Qi's face. "I don't care what kind of storm you are going to throw at me. Now, all I need is the innate gold energy, and I'll be able to gather all 5 elements. When I've mastered all 5 elements of 7 foundation establishment technique and formed the Golden Dan, my overall strength will be comparable to an earth immortal of nascent soul realm. At that time, I'll deal with you." Leaping off the mount, Wu Qi stamped his feet and murmured under his breath, "Since I'm already here, I might as well live a more exciting life. My exciting life is destined to be paved with the tragedy of many people." Wei Longfeng, you unlucky bastard, you've saved me a lot of time and effort. Speaking of which, it has been a long time since I last saw Qin Shuwen. If only I could steal all of his golden Dan energy, hee. Pulling the mount and entering Mount White Sun, Wu Qi ignored all the disciples of heaven-breaking sword sect along the way and came to the foot of the main peak of Mount White Sunday. He patted the mount's butt and told it to go back to graze on the grass. After that, he tilted his head up and cried out loudly, Master, Grand Elder, are you there? Disciple Wu Qi is here to see you. I have something good to tell you. A white beam shot down from the top of the cliff, wrapped around Wu Qi, and brought him up to the top of the cliff. At the top of the cliff, Nia Yaonu had transplanted another batch of ancient pine trees from an unknown place and planted them in front of the entrance of sword stems from the mine. A few more stone blocks and a stone table were placed under the pine trees. She and Nia Baiheng were sitting next to the stone table. A pot of tea was placed on the table, emitting a sweet aroma. Upon seeing Wu Qi, Nia Baiheng frowned and asked, How is your cultivation of the qi circulating technique of 5 elements? You can't learn the sword techniques of heaven-breaking sword sect without reaching the mastery of Xiantian realm. You've been running around everywhere, and I don't see you doing anything serious. Ignoring Nia Baiheng, Wu Qi turned to Nia Yaonu and said smilingly, Grand Elder, disciple will exchange the sword technique of mountain crumbling and sky burning for the sword technique of azure water, sword technique of green thunder, and sword technique of thunderclap. I also need to borrow a good equipment crafting room, as there are some things that I need to process. Nia Yaonu and Nia Baiheng sprung to their feet and cried out in surprise, What? Mountain crumbling and sky burning? You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.